Today, I'll go over what if Deku got plasmids from BioShock. And all the credit goes to the author in the description below. Let us begin. Chapter 1. Dagobah Beach, 2340. Rejected. He was rejected. He was always rejected. His father left him when he was 5. He lost all of his friends when he was 6, even Kachan, his best friend. Even his hero, his childhood idol, All Might rejected him. All because he was quirkless. Just because he did not have a special superpower like 80% of the planet's population. No, he was one of the 20% that didn't. Worse, he was the only one from his generation that he knew of. Most others were over 60. Izuku Midoriya took a deep breath, held it for a few seconds, and let it out through his mouth. He already cried over it. Crying would do him no good, though he would admit to being frustrated and depressed. He won. He beat that sludge villain that attacked him, having dodged to the side when he saw him. He used the taser his mother got him for self-defense. Aiming for the eyes, he defeated the sludge villain before All Might had even arrived. Yet when he asked him, Izuku was still told the same thing. I cannot say a quirkless can be a hero. At least All Might had the decency to recommend other professions like the police. No one else ever did that. Oh, and signed the All Might section of his hero's analysis notebook. Which was pretty cool. Even Izuku's mother Inko only ever looked at him with worry, like she was afraid he would break if she said anything. He wouldn't. He promised long ago that if no one else believed in him, then he would believe in himself. Katsuki Bakugo, Kachan, started considering Izuku less when he got his quirk and Izuku didn't. He started calling him Deku, which means useless, worthless. Once Izuku tried to stop him from bullying some kid, Kachan turned violent. It wasn't just insulting anymore. Hell, he even went so far as to tell Izuku to kill himself mere hours before the sludge villain attacked him. It wasn't always like that. Their mothers were best friends, so they practically spent the first 4 years of their lives as brothers. Then the bullying began, and it hurt far more than the physical blows did, to have someone that important turn on him. For God's sake, even his teachers didn't think he would amount to much. They even went so far as to encourage the bullies. One teacher went so far as to convince Izuku that he isn't even human, all because he lacks a quirk. At times Izuku believed him. Everyone had a quirk, something that was individually theirs, everyone except him. However, everyone let up a bit when a cop came to the school to get his statement on the sludge villain. Some of the students expressed disbelief that he beat a villain until the teacher, who was allowed to supervise the interaction at Inko Midoriya's request, revealed that the cop, Detective Tsukauchi Naomasa, had a lie detection quirk, and he found no lies. Izuku shook his head to clear his thoughts as he hauled another trash bag. He couldn't think about the people that didn't believe. It has been a few days and Izuku was currently cleaning Dagobah Beach both as a civil service and to hopefully build some muscle. It isn't like he never trained. He wants to be a hero after all. It's just that he spent more time on other training, such as makeshift weapons, some admittedly self-taught martial arts, his analysis. Dagobah Beach was a place where the ocean currents would wash trash up upon the shore. Eventually, people started illegally dumping their trash there. Now there is not an inch of coast of the beach that is not covered in trash, with heaps of trash that towers over most people. However, Izuku has been coming to clean it for about a month at this point, which is where we find ourselves. Izuku pulled a large tire off the large metal case he had been uncovering for a while now. It was large, easily as big as a standalone freezer, which is what he thought it was at first. As he looked at it, he saw it was a rusted metal and had probably washed ashore given the buildup on its outside. It appeared to be sealed and much too heavy to move. If he could empty it, he could likely move it. Thankfully, the metal was old and liable to give way if he tried to pry the lid off with a crowbar he found on the ground. The things other people are willing to throw away, he thought. He proceeds to jam the crowbar into the seal and starts prying it apart with all his strength. Just as he thinks it is not going to give, the lid practice launches off, causing Izuku to lose his balance and fall. OWW. Okay, that hurt, he says as he holds his head when he stands up, carefully avoiding a slippery something Then he continues as he looks inside the metal box. What the hell? As he looks inside, he sees a good number of odd-looking bottles with a glow coming from the bright red liquid, though one was a strange bright purple, and an oversized tape recorder with a large speaker on it. The bottles are carefully arranged and packaged to prevent damage during transport. With the tape recorder are numerous tapes, one for each bottle. Confused and curious, Izuku reaches in and hefts up the tape recorder and looks it over. He notices it has a tape inside it, and after thinking about it for a second, shrugs and clicks the play button. As the tape begins to play, he reaches in and picks up one of the bottles. As he picks it up, he notices that each one has a large needle attached to it. Hello, friend, thank you for ordering Fontaine Futuristic's revolutionary superpowers in a bottle, the wonderful, amazing, plasmids. You have the honor of being the first and only one to order every single superpower plasmid and body-altering tonic. All you need to do is inject it into your veins and boom, fire at the snap of a finger, telekinesis to pick up things so far away, teleportation instead of walking, mind control that annoying neighbor, hell, shoot lightning from your fingers. Izuku paused the tape with wide eyes. What the fuck? Okay, so this is kind of insane and the stuff is glowing. He may be frustrated and maybe a tad depressed, but he's not just going to inject himself with a strange substance. Izuku starts walking to pace back and forth as he reaches into his pocket for his cell phone, now looking at the bottle in his hand. Well, more of a large syringe now that he was holding it. Yeah, this sounds like something the police should be aware, unfortunately, and the facilities he slipped into the weird puddle he noticed earlier, causing him to fall. As he landed on the floor and tried his back, he saw his cell phone go flying and then felt pain in his shoulder. He looked to see the bottle, syringe, whatever sticking out of his shoulder. That was all the further he got before unimaginable pain overtook him. God, he couldn't even scream. Izuku thrashed on the ground in agony and panic. The panic that only increased when he noticed his fingertips were on fire and the fire was spreading to the rest of his hands. He watched in terror as his flaming hands seemed to flake and turn to ash as the fire spread down his forearm. That's when he passed out. Line break, Dagoba. Izuku's eyes were open yet unfocused. He blinked several times, yet it did nothing to get rid of the haze. After a few moments he began to regain some focus, and the first thing he noticed was mountains of trash. The second was the sun. It was only a little further than what it was, so it was likely not out for long. The third was a pain in his left shoulder. As he looked at his shoulder, he was startled and suddenly hyper-aware as the large syringe had fallen out of his shoulder in his thrashing, yet the thing was empty. The young man was looking around in a panic as he realized that he hadn't dreamt what happened. He had been injected with a mysterious drug. As he looked at his shoulder, the panic he felt as his hand caught on fire returned full force. Izuku tried to take a deep breath, but the only thing that he succeeded at was hyperventilating. He sat on the ground, remembering the agony he was in for several minutes before finally regaining control of his breath. Okay, good news, my shoulder is in pain but otherwise looks fine. It does not look like I have been unconscious for long, Izuku thought. Seeing his cell phone on the ground, he reaches for it and checks the time, learning that he has only been out for about half an hour. Looking at the needle, he continues with, bad news. That happened, yeah. Now that Izuku had gotten a hold of his panic, he began to stand up, nearly falling again as he was unsteady on his feet. He noticed that the tracksuit he was wearing was completely soaked through by whatever it was that he had slipped in, and it stunk badly. Seriously? He took a deep breath and released it in an attempt to calm himself. Frustrated, he said, whatever. After taking that breath, he realizes he's burning this tracksuit. With that, he makes his way over to the box and the tape recorder. Maybe this can explain. It did say, fire at the snap of a finger. Before he picks up the tape recorder again, he snaps his finger only for his left hand to catch fire familiarly. As he sees the fire spreading, he begins to freak out, thrashing his arms about in a desperate attempt to put out the fire. It's a few moments of failure to put it out that he realizes that it does not burn him, or hurt at all. Huh. Tapes. Tapes now. Izuku thinks as he reaches for the tape recorder with shaky breath. He rewinds it for a few seconds, then clicks play. Oing neighbor, hell, shoot lightning from your fingertips. Of course, You already know this, you bought them after all. At your request, we placed a tape with each plasmid and tonic to detail and identify them. Just to clarify once more, tonics are passive, increasing strength, speed, intelligence, and perception. Plasmids are things such as telekinesis and fire. So tonics are enhancement quirks and plasmids are emitters. We at Fontaine Futuristics also thank you for being willing to test our brand new Eve Eternal Tonic. It's a purple one. You see, to power plasmids you need fuel. Eve is that fuel. Problem, you get that by injection, via Eve Hypo. It's kind of like refueling a car. You watch that gas meter go down and down and down. Not anymore now with the Eve Eternal. The gas tank will refuel itself as if by magic. You will need to eat more to supplement your body's ability to produce the Eve, and you can still use it faster than you get it back. But like I said, you will make the stuff. Now the gas tank refills as time goes on. More information will be provided by the tapes, each labeled after the plasmid and tonic they pertain to. Okay, so that's helpful, Izuku says as he reaches for the tape packed against where he pulled his plasmid from. Incinerate. Well, looks like I have a name for it now. At least I could pass this off as my quirk since my father could breathe fire. By this point, his left hand is no longer on fire. Chapter 2. The evil that is writer's block did not get me. A big thank you to everyone who reviewed it. Like I said, this is the first time I have done something like this, so I am very happy that this has been well received. I also noticed a mistake I made in the last chapter. It's nothing major, but I forgot the exclamation mark at the end of Incinerate. Another that I forgot is that Izuku does not know about Skinny Might. All Might came, took the villain, talked with Izuku, and left with time to spare. To Roboman. Good point, it would be Eve rather than Eve Hypo. Eve Hypo is just what it is called in the game when you find or buy it because it comes in a syringe, but since Izuku will produce the stuff, it would just be Eve. I will correct that when I figure out how, because I'm new to posting on fanfiction. Author's note. I have figured out how and am doing it now, literally minutes after I posted the second chapter. To Dente Watterson. I'm sorry, but Izuku is not going to get one for all. That would just be too much. I do not yet have an idea as to who will get it, but All Might will be looking for a successor during the school year. Plus I imagine All Might would be a little distrustful of Izuku because he has so many quirks and may believe the green bean has something to do with All for One. To Halo. I understand why you would have wanted that to be revealed to the readers at a later time, but I'm honestly too new to writing to trust myself with doing the reveal the justice it would deserve. I may rewrite this fanfiction at a later date when I get more experience, but for now it is what it is. Now I have to be mean to Izuku this chapter to give him a reason to take more superpower injections. Disclaimer. I do not own My Hero Academia or BioShock. Line break into the story 3 weeks. They let up for 3 weeks, then they started bullying him again. It was a weak villain, please. You got lucky. Don't get a big head, you're still a loser. If a quirkless could beat him, so could I. Annoying, pathetic Deku. These were all things that were said. It was starting to get to him again. It hasn't really affected him in a long time, but getting a quirk, freaking out over finding the crate. Because the police have to be looking for this. There's no way Fontaine Futuristics isn't a criminal organization. And just hurt pride, it's actually getting to him. The only good thing is that Kachan's still being amiable, well kinda. Izuku has wondered why Kachan had not joined in bullying him for several weeks, when he used to lead the charge, so to speak. Several of their classmates were as well, and when asked by one of his lackeys he responded with, "Oh fuck off fingers, I spent this whole time thinking he was trying to become a hero on study and idiotic dreams alone. I can at least respect that he is actually training and pushing himself. Don't get me wrong, the shitty nerd and I aren't friends, but at least he's actually going for it instead of just hoping it will happen. He's at the very least better than you extras. Though I'm still go to be number one and crush any competition." Izuku believed that this was Kachan's way of saying he was worth something. Though even with Kachan tolerating him, everyone else was becoming so much to deal with. The ironic thing being that he had access to every quirk he could ever want. After his accident at the beach, Izuku covered the crate up and ran home to think. During the time he was thinking, he remembered certain things that had been said to him. "Look, kid, how do you expect to be a hero when you aren't even human? Worthless, useless, subhuman, quirkless. I have an idea for how you can be a hero. Go up to the roof of the school, take a swan dive and pray that you get one in the next life." Huh, get a quirk. He has one now. What would his mother think? The son she thought was quirkless for 14 years now has a quirk. She would either be overjoyed or terrified that her child now has an actual chance at the dangerous life of a hero. Probably both. When his mother did get home, she immediately sent him to take a shower, or 3. His jumpsuit was trashed and never seen again. In the end, Izuku didn't tell her. Speaking of his quirk, Plasmid Incinerate, he has been practicing with it at the beach, near the water. He has learned that the quirk, Plasmid, can be used in several ways thanks to the tapes. In actuality, Incinerate has 3 different variants, though the next 2 simply have numbers added on. He simply gabbed the weakest of the 3 when he picked it up. In his training, he has learned that he can ignite his hands on fire and launch fire from his hands. If he charges the fire up, he can launch a small fireball with a larger area of effect than he expected. The longer he charges it, the bigger the fireball gets. At one point, he tried to see how large of a fireball he could make, and well, it turns out he can only safely charge it for so long, though on the plus side, by charging long enough, he can turn his hand into a flamethrower. Line break into a flashback. Izuku snapped his finger and watched in fascination as a small yellow-orange fireball sailed toward the water before engulfing the pile of trash that he had on a piece of wood about 30 feet from the shore. As he saw this, he took note of the area of effect the fire had. He noted that the fire was hot enough to ignite it immediately without difficulty. He mused that one can't be a very good hero when they hurt the people they're trying to protect or cause large-scale property damage. Endeavor, for example, has the highest arrest count out of any hero, but is also on the higher end of the property damage scale, so to speak. When he was done writing what he observed, he set his notebook on the crate containing the plasmids, then pressed play on the tape recorder to listen to the information on the incinerate plasmid again. Incineration. When it absolutely positively has to erupt in flames. Don't wait, incinerate. The tape then went on to explain the different uses of the plasmid, most of which were weirdly mundane, such as melting ice, lighting cigarettes, cigars, igniting the fire on a gas stove, and a fireplace. Which is kind of weird since Izuku is pretty sure these were made by criminals. The tape went on to describe the strengths and weaknesses of the plasmid, such as how entering water immediately puts it out, which makes sense, but the heat of the fire should at least heat up the water to steam in the process. The tape did eventually get to how the plasmid can be used for combat, and Izuku paid special attention to this as he readied another target and pushed it into the water. He charged up the power as the tape described and noticed that a small fireball formed on the palm of his hands, then released. The fireball increased in size as it left his hand, going from the size of a golf ball to the size of an American football. The area of effect was much larger this time as well, easily 5 times as large. By this point the tape had stopped playing, but Izuku didn't pay that any attention. He had been doing this for a while now, and a thought had occurred to him. He did not know how large he could make a fireball. He watched as what was left of his previous target sank beneath the water and decided he did not need a target to test this. Izuku readied his hand and began charging the power. He could feel something draining away, which he assumed was that Eve's stuff that was supposed to power plasmids. When the fireball was charging, it got brighter, and after a few seconds his hand started to hurt because of the heat that was building up. It was far from the worst pain that he had ever felt, so he kept charging before suddenly fire burst from his hand. Not as a fireball, but as a continuous eruption of flame that immediately reduced the water he was aiming at to steam before sputtering out. He had neither been expecting the literal flamethrower, but had adjusted to that quickly, or the fire stopping. He tried to conjure fire to his hands once more, only for nothing to happen. Line break back to the present, which is how we got to here 5 days later. Izuku standing over the crate at Dagoba Beach, staring at the glowing purple syringe. The Eve Eternal. He can't use incinerate again if he doesn't take it. He wants to be a hero, and having a quirk would make that so much more feasible, but should he? He remembers everyone's comments, the insults, all the horrible things people have said and done to him. Izuku finds his hand reaching for the Eve Eternal. He stared at it for a moment before lining the needle up with vein on his wrist and injected himself. It hurt. He leaned over the crate to support himself. It hurt far less than the first, and he was far more prepared for it. But it still hurt, at least until he could feel something. It was like a glow or an energy inside of his body, a familiar energy. He stood from his lean on the crate and looked at his hand, and snapped his finger, smiling when the fire spread once more. He let the fire go out as he took a deep breath. When he let it out, he looked into the crate and started thinking. Thinking about taking more. Should I? I already have 2, and some are literally just upgrades to what I already have. The telekinesis is similar enough to Mom's to write off as a mutation in her quirk, at least according to the tapes. Though it is much more powerful, and its versatility would be very useful. This time Izuku hesitated before reaching in and picking up first Incinerate, 2 and 3, then all 3 variants of telekinesis. As it turns out, a lot of the plasmids and tonics have stronger versions of themselves. Why did whoever this crate was supposed to go to buy all the variants of the plasmids? Do you need to take the first before you can take the second? Izuku paused for a moment. Am I actually doing this? He thought just a second. Fine, yes I am. Better go with caution and take them in order. At this he picked up the next version of Incinerate, and used it. To be safe, he decided to test his quirk and activated it. When he did, there was now a ball of fire already there, whereas before he had to charge it for the fire to appear. When he fired the ball at the water, it was already the size of a football. When he charged it, the fireball was now the size of a basketball. When he took the third Incinerate, the fire had turned blue. Izuku stared at it in wonder and awe. It was amazing. He now had one of the hottest fires in the palm of his hands. This time when he threw the fireball, it practically exploded in a beautiful blue flame. When he did so, he could feel his Eve go down. His brow furrowed. While his pool of Eve was gradually coming back, he could easily see how he could run out all too quickly. He nodded his head, taking a mental note to actually write that down when he gets home. Before Izuku injects himself with the telekinesis plasmid, he first puts the corresponding tape into the tape recorder. Pick up big stuff with your mind. Throw it at your enemies. What else do you need to know? Oh my, how detailed, Izuku thought sarcastically. Thankfully it did go into greater detail, but continued with the same vein as the other tapes had, as an advertisement for the plasmids. It talked about lifting furniture during cleaning and other mundane things like making coffee while reading the newspaper. An interesting bit of information is that one can hold an object indefinitely without using up any Eve. However, if he wishes to throw an object, then it will use Eve depending on the size of the object and the velocity he chooses to throw it at. The basic telekinesis allows the user to lift something about the size of All Might. While it gave weight and size, the tape referenced something called a Big Daddy, with relative ease. That is to say, as long as it is not struggling. The stronger variants basically get just that, but a person of average physical power will no longer be strong enough to break out of its hold on the third tier. Then again, the third is strong enough to lift a pickup truck, so that's not surprising. Izuku takes a breath and pick up the first of the telekinesis plasmids, and then the next, and then the last one. He gives it a moment to settle and looks around for a decent test for his new quirk. First he tests it out on a ratted stuffed animal and is surprised when it rockets towards him. He raises his hands to catch it, but it stops in front of him, floating just out of reach. After a few seconds he starts to move it around. He notices quickly that if he moves the bear around he stops gaining Eve, likely using it as fast as he gains it. However, like the tape said, if he keeps it still it does not drain anything. He finally throws the torn up stuffed bear as hard as he can. The thing hits a fridge so hard it practically explodes, and knocks the fridge back a good 5 feet. Throwing it with everything he had did so literally, draining him of all his Eve. Admittedly, he likely hadn't built up a full reserve, but still, he would have to carefully watch how much he wishes to use at once. After allowing himself a moment to build up his reserves once more, he moved on to lifting other things, gradually getting heavier and heavier, until finally he was doing the same things with the fridge. He maintained as little difficulty with the fridge as he did the stuffed bear. Then filled the fridge as full as he could with his shaky control of his telekinesis. Still he moved it. Remembering the limits the tape mentioned, Izuku started towards one of the cars he saw buried in the junk. Seriously, the things people throw away here. He was finally having some difficulty lifting something. Though the heavier the object, the more Eve he used by just slowly moving it. Really maintaining Eve is going to be difficult as hell. Wait, didn't I see a tonic called Eve Saver? By the time he went home, he had taken several more injections, all of which were tonics, including the previously mentioned Eve Saver 1 and 2, which greatly reduces the amount of Eve used by plasmids at once. The tape mentioned a 30% reduction to the amount used. Photographer's Eye 1 and 2, which greatly increases the perception of an individual and allows for a greater intake of information. It is basically an analysis quirk. Human Inferno 1 and 2, which further increases the power of his fire and provides a significant degree of fire resistance. The 2's power apparently stacks, with the first giving a 20% increase to heat resistance and 30% increase to the fire's power. The second offering 40% resistance and 50% damage increase. This provides a total of 60% greater resistance to fire and increases the power of his flames by 80%. While there is a third tier under the name of Walking Inferno, Izuku only took the first two for the sake of the resistances, not wanting to build his fire up much farther while he still has such limited control. Walking Inferno provides 90% heat damage increase and resistance. Wrench Jockey 1 and 2, odd name, that increases upper body strength and increasing striking power by, what the tape claims, 900%. The first claims to provide 350%, while the second claims 550%, stating that they stack. Armored Shell 1 and 2 provides the user with resistance to both piercing and bludgeoning. It claims to protect the user from most forms of physical damage. Sport Boost 1 and 2 increases one's movement and striking speed. The tape states 6.66% increase to overall movement and a 75% increase to striking speed. Medical Expert 1, 2 and 3 provides an innate knowledge of medical skills and understanding of how to handle injury. Leg Up grants an increased jumping ability, allowing the user to charge their jump for a greater leap. Fast Feet both makes an individual faster on their feet, increasing running speed. It also makes one's footsteps quieter. Eve Expert increases his overall limit for EVE that he can build up and maintain. Izuku's wrist was sore by the time he goes home, though oddly enough there were no needle marks. Line break on the way home. God, he was only planning on taking few at most, so why did he take 18 tonics? He saw some that were useful for his Eve consumption, then he saw others that could be useful for his dream of being a hero, and he just kept going. It wasn't until he took the last one that he realized that he was taking so many, or at least the implications of it. He took the Eve Eternal because wanted to be a hero, he wanted to be human. He took the telekinesis because he could pass it off something he inherited, and it would be useful in heroics. He took the Eve-based tonics because they would provide some help in maintaining his reserves of Eve, which could save both his and others' lives. So why did he take the others? He wants to rationalize and say they would be useful. But the truth is he just wanted them. He took the Eve Eternal, then he took another, then another. And with each that he took, the others stated to become more and more tantalizing until it took a conscious effort to force himself to stop. Why did he do that? Yes, he wanted to give himself an edge, but he was literally stabbing himself with needles. That's not something one does without thought. Not something someone is elated to do. He was getting power, he was getting more. And that worried him. He was so worried that he was crying when he walked into his home. He couldn't help it. No matter how much he tried to rein that in, Midoriya's were criers. His mother was in the kitchen when he walked in, cooking dinner. She did not notice him at first, but when she did, her response was immediate. She practically flew to him and wrapped him in a hug. "Dwa, sweetie, are you okay? You're crying. Are you hurt? My baby, what's wrong?" She rambled on in a similar vein until Izuku raised his hand and pulled a couch cushion to them, levitating it with his mind. Silence took over as Inko realized what this meant. Her son had a quirk. Before Inko could crush him in a hug, Izuku smiled with a shaky breath, raised his other hand and wreathed it in blue fire. This time the tears were all his mother's as she rushed him and pulled him into a bear hug. My baby has a quirk, you got both of our quirks. Oh Izuku, I'm so happy for you. Izuku smiled as his mother fussed over him. This would be okay. After dinner his mother said something to him. Something he wishes he hears sooner, but still meant everything to him now. Izuku, sweetie, I always knew you would be a hero. Even quirkless, you were always too stubborn to settle for anything less. I'm sorry for never saying it before. She said with tears in her eyes. I'm thankful, son, because you would have become a hero either way, but it will be so much safer for you now that you have a quirk. Izuku went to bed with a smile on his face that night, the worries of the plasmids, tonics and the thoughts and actions of everyone else lifting from his mind for the first time in weeks. His mother had always believed in him. Line break to the author's notes. Keep in mind, people, I said he would find every single plasmid, tonic, and vigor, not that he would take all of them. Such as the tonic walking inferno, he's not going to take that one. I'm thinking of having him meet Dobby before the entrance exam, though I'm unsure if I want him to be a vigilante, stay a villain, or start training to become an underground hero. Seriously, I think Dobby would be overjoyed to get a near 100% resistance to fire, since Walking Inferno provides a 90% resistance, and gives a 90% increase to power with his fire. What do you guys think? Dobby is going to get Walking Inferno, but what will Dobby become? I also have another idea. What if Frank Fontaine survived? He had the entire city's supply of Atom flowing through him. So what if he healed from his injuries at the end of the first game and the Atom made functionally immortal like the Little Sisters, but he had to lay low due to being weakened? I'm just sort of toying with the idea, so I have no clue if I'll use it or not. Figured I would see what you guys thought. I also may or may not have my younger brother, Discorded Shio, as a beta reader, and he may or may not be using my computer to upload his own fanfiction. Once again, please provide constructive criticism and feedback. Omake. What the fuck do you mean, Deku has a quirk? You heard what I said, brat. I just got off the phone with Inko. Izuku was apparently a late bloomer. No way, that fucker lied to me for years. I'm going to kill him. Oh, come off it. Do you really fucking think Izuku lied to his own mother for years, or that Inko lied to me? Katsuki's head was spinning. Oh sure, he thought the loser had the potential to become an underground hero at most. You don't defeat a villain without some potential. But now the shitty Deku has a quirk. What the fuck even is his quirk? Apparently he can use a stronger form of telekinesis, and has a blue fire that wraps around his hand. Mitsuki paused and thought for a moment. Inko didn't go into too much detail about what he can do with it, and he has some kind of strength enhancement. Wait, strength? He was grinding his teeth. Fucking Deku probably thought he could take his place as the #1 hero. Yeah, Inko thinks either her or the bastard has some kind of minor, barely noticeable, strength quirk that Izuku inherited. Katsuki was internally fuming. Even if the dumbass never lied, he was now competition. And he was the only #1. Chapter 3. For this chapter and the next we will be following Dobby. In this chapter Dobby is set on a path he never expected. In the next he meets Izuku. Disclaimer. I do not own My Hero Academia or BioShock. Line break into the story. Dobby was pissed. This bastard runs a homeless shelter. On the surface a real stand-up guy. And Dobby finds him killing a teenager in an alleyway. Dobby hates that. Scum that pretend to be good people. In the local area the man is even called a hero. Doesn't have a license or anything, but people still look up to him. He has suspected this guy for a while now, been looking into him and gathering evidence. Hell, he was on the way to the police station to anonymously drop off the evidence he gathered to them. That way everyone will know why he turned up dead. Not that he's ever killed before, but this monster deserves it. That, and he reminds Dobby of someone he promised to take down to make his family safe. The police have suspected that the one responsible for the string of murders could teleport. But they didn't suspect him. That's the problem with society. Just because someone seems good they must be good. No chance of skeletons in their closet. Dobby knows that isn't true. He's angry this monster is called a hero of the people and thinks he can get away with shit like this. Enraged that men like his father can be pro-heroes and just get away with hurting like this. Dobby ignites his hands in a brilliant blue fire and said, "Mr. Tachimikau Zankoku, I need you to step away from the girl." Said girl looked at Dobby, terrified, with eyes that were begging for help, but also hopeful that somebody came to help her. Her auburn, bobbed hair was disheveled and her large eyes were filled with tears that streamed past her pink cheeks. She couldn't have been any older than Shoto would be at this point. Dobby wasn't going to show this fucker any mercy. The man spoke as he turned around. "Great. A witness. Look pal, it's nothing personal." Zankoku clearly wasn't prepared for this if the way he was shaking was anything to go by. And Dobby could see fear in his eyes. It was probably the staples that hold his charred flesh together. That usually intimidates people. But you have to die. Dobby could see multiple knives on Zankoku's person. The man disappeared in a flash red, only to appear right in front of Dobby and swiped with his knife. But Dobby, no matter how much he hated the one that did it, was well trained and easily sidestepped the attack, following up by driving his knee into the murderer's chest. While the man still has the wind knocked out of him, Dobby gives him a flaming uppercut to the face, before grabbing him and throwing the bastard into a wall. There is another flash of red before the man collides with the wall and he appears on the other side of the alleyway in a roll to slow his momentum. The gray-haired man can teleport when moving, but he can't stop any momentum he had when he teleported. He'll still be moving just as fast, in the same direction, when he comes back. And Dobby could take advantage of that. Dobby looked at the girl and motioned for her to run, happy when she got the hint. He noticed her pull out her cell phone as she ran out of the alleyway. That means the police are going to be on their way soon. Good. Zankoku ran at him this time with the knife aimed at Dobby. However, when he lashed out he overextended his swing, allowing Dobby to get a grip on his arm. Using this hold, the burnt man delivered multiple blows to the killer's chest and face. When the man had managed to pull himself from Dobby's grip, he tried to get some distance between them. Dobby, however, wasn't having this and unleashed a controlled torrent of flame at him. Zankoku's response was to run in the opposite direction and teleport, appearing on the opposite side of Dobby. As he was still moving in the same direction, he collided with Dobby. While Zankoku had Dobby in this position, he lashed out with his blade several times and he did get him. Only for Dobby to melt the knife with fire, giving himself a new minor, to Dobby anyway, burn in the process. By this point Zankoku realized that CQC with the burn scar-covered man would not end well for him. At this he changed tactics, dropping his melted knife, and grabbed another from his collection he had on himself. He once again started moving away from Dobby, and once again appeared behind him. As Dobby turned around just as the killer appeared, the man threw the knife, teleporting just as he did so, which Dobby barely dodged. Dobby wasn't so lucky with the second one, which lodged in his left shoulder. Dobby swore. That was the first time he made a mistake like that in a while. As the mon's attack pattern was predictable, always attacking from behind, Dobby decided to stop being nice, and as Zankoku appeared once more, Dobby was already on the move. By the time he was there, Dobby was tackling him to the ground. The burnt man showed no quarter as he delivered numerous flaming blows to the mon's face, burning him a little more with each hit. With the last hit, several of Zankoku's teeth fell from his mouth. Dobby found himself pushed off of his punching bag, who had managed to get his feet between his assailant and himself. By the time Dobby stood up, Zankoku was charging at him, and once again had been caught off guard. Dobby had the wind knocked out of him as the killer tackled him, before pushing the unbalanced man back towards the wall. Then the man teleported back several feet and tackling again, and again. As Dobby got closer to the wall, he, having prepared for another tackle, jumped to the side. He watched in satisfaction as Zankoku collided with the wall shoulder first. His satisfaction rose when he saw how tired the middle-aged man he was fighting was. He was panting heavily and sweat now covered his brow. Zankoku was clearly not used to long drawn-out fights. He usually killed his targets quickly, and those he took his time with weren't even capable of fighting back. Dobby took note of his shoulder. It had a knife pretty deep in it, a good 4 inches, and it had been bleeding heavily for most of the fight. He was actually starting to feel somewhat lightheaded. He probably would have finished the fight sooner if it weren't for that injury. Zankoku usually targeted homeless people, or those that did not have family in the area, so why was he going after? A gunshot rang out from the world round him, and the last words he heard before everything went were, "No, not him, he's the one who saved me." Line break to the hospital. Several days later, Dobby awoke to the sound of beeping. One that was very familiar to him from his childhood under the number 2 hero. He took stock of his surroundings. Looking down, he saw that he was no longer in his own clothes. Yep, a freaking hospital. Griat. He thought sarcastically. On the plus side, his staples had been replaced with actual surgical staples. And he did notice that his burns were less extreme, with all his new ones being gone completely. After a while, the nurses came and checked on him. They asked him questions about his quirk. Asked him when he had last eaten properly. Asked him questions he'd rather not answer. "No, I will not tell you where I got my burns from. I tried that when I was a kid and I was called a liar." The number 2 would never do something like that. When the doctors gave him the details of what had been done to him, he was pleasantly surprised. During his stay in the hospital, they had been periodically treating his burns with quirks and modern medicine. By the time he leaves, he will no longer need the staples to literally hold himself together. Too bad that won't last, since he plans to get back to the fight. As much as he hated it, when the doctor asked him if he was Tuya Todoroki, he had to say yes. They apparently already knew, so there was no use in lying, though he did make it clear he was disowned. He didn't care if it was official or not. The bastard made it clear he was not welcome back. He told them he changed his name to Dobby. He gave much the same line to the police when they questioned him. "So how did you even know who I was? I doubt you just keep Endeavor's blood on hand to compare with everyone that has a fire quirk." Detective Noamasa gave a deep sigh. "You're dodging the question, again. If your father disowned you, why did he report you missing, then later dead? He's the fucking number 2. Do you really think that he is willing to let a situation like that sully his name?" Dobby basically spat the words "number 2. That would be a crime for him to do, both as child neglect, and falsifying a police report most defiantly would be. Oh please, it wouldn't be the first time he lied and broke the law to cover his own ass. He cares about his number far too much to leave things to chance. I don't know why he does the shit he does. Ask him. I'm just the failed prototype. Dobby noticed that the detective shifted uncomfortably in his seat at that. Tell you what, detective, you answer the question I asked and I will tell you all about my bout of vigilantism in the alley. That's why you're actually here, isn't it? I'm here for a lot of things, your concerning statements now among them, but yes, I do need your description of events. Dobby could practically see the guy getting age lines, whatever not like the cop actually believed him. Fine. We have a member of the police force who was brought in to look at you while you were unconscious. Their quirk lets them see an individual's past via these windows that they can materialize. The quirk is not dependent on one's memories, but actually show what happened in the past. He can do this to a rock just as readily as he can to a person. He can only use it for so long before it causes massive migraines, though. We only used it to get your name, so we don't actually know anything that happened to you. All right, guess it's my turn. Dobby began, only to be interrupted by the detective. Rude. Before you begin, this is going to be recorded like everything else, and at this point I'll tell you that I have a lie detection quirk. Huh, so that's why the guy looked uncomfortable when they were talking about Endeavor. The detective knew he was telling the truth. Not that it mattered. Dobby was disenfranchised with heroes and cops long ago. They look out for each other, no matter who gets hurt in the way. Either way, Dobby told the cop everything. How he learned what Zankoku was doing, who he talked to gather information. He told the cop how he was on his way to anomalously drop off the info, in the form of a USB, to the police. The cop looked like he appreciated that at least, so it was probably a good thing that Dobby never brought up his plans to kill the bastard. He never lied, he just didn't bring it up. When he found Zankoku trying to kill a teenager, he described the fight in as much detail as he could. though he expresses his annoyance at being caught off guard by the thrown knife, and expresses greater displeasure at being shot. So, Dobby says as casually as he can, "Who did that?" "A rookie cop. He took one look at the situation and decided to act on stereotypes. He has been reprimanded and lost his badge." "Why?" "He may have shot me, but I am a vigilante. Did he loose the killer or something?" The detective had schooled himself as much as he could. "I'm afraid that information is not something that you need to know." But Dobby could see through him. "Guess he has something to do when he gets away from all this. Tell me the girl is at least okay." The detective nodded his head. "She's pretty shaken up, but other than that she's fine." The detective paused for a moment. "You know, I'm pretty sure you have a fan at this point. When I was talking to her a few days ago she wouldn't stop talking about how cool you were. With your blue fire, and I quote, dancing like guardian spirits." Dobby snorted. "Glad to see the kid's all right. So you still want that evidence?" "It was in my right pants pocket." Line break to a few hours later. "I thought we were done for the day, detective," Dobby says in his best impression of All Might. Dobby thinks he nailed it. The detective looks less than impressed. At one point in their conversations Dobby learned that the detective has worked closely with All Might in the past, and is actually good friends with him. By this point Dobby was just done with the questions and had started doing All Might impressions to annoy the man. "I am, thankfully, though he wants to talk to you," then walks back out the door. Dobby looks at the door, but does not see anyone there, though he does hear someone clearing their throat. Dobby looks down to see a mouse, dog, bear thing that he recognizes as the principal of the famous hero school UA. "I can tell by the look in your eyes that you are wondering, am I a mouse, a dog, a bear? It really doesn't matter. All that matters is that I, Nezu, am here to speak to you," the sapient animal says with no small amount of joy. "Believe me, I don't actually care what you are." But seriously, he does. "What is he? What do you want?" "I want you to come work for me," the principal said as if that wasn't an insane thing to say. Dobby made a show of cleaning his ears. "What? I said I want you to come work for me," just as jovially as before. "You do realize that I'm likely going to be arrested for vigilantism, right? This would make the rodent take back the insane statement, right?" "I wouldn't worry about that too much. This is technically a first offense, and you did express an interest in getting the evidence to the police. That, and it isn't like you tortured anyone. Aren't all employees of hero schools licensed pro-heroes?" Dobby tried again. "It wouldn't be too hard to get you to be a licensed underground hero." This time Dobby gave a definitive answer. No, if Dobby could describe the animal's facial expression it would be nonplussed. "Really? I have no interest in being a hero. If that were true you would have left the poor girl to die. Heroes are all about fame, money, and a stupid-ass popularity contest. I'm not. No way in hell. While there are a disheartening number of heroes who are heroes for those reasons, when you described yourself, you described nearly every single underground hero. Can't this bastard take a hint?" "I've already said no. This is less about not wanting to be a hero, and more about not wanting to be like your father, isn't it?" Okay, now Dobby was pissed and got ready to yell at the damned rodent. "How fucking dare yo!" Only to be interrupted by said rodent. "What if I told you I could help you put Endeavor in prison?" Dobby was stunned silent. Did Nezu even know what he just offered? Nezu continued talking and Dobby figured he would at least listen to him. Not that he was going to accept the job. "Detective Naomasa approached me over several of your worrying statements during your questioning. From what he was able to put together, Endeavor is both an abusive father and a corrupt hero. Obviously he can't arrest Endeavor over your statements alone, so he asked me to look into this for him. Being one of the most intelligent beings in Japan means I could likely find any information Endeavor wants to remain hidden." Why the hell should I believe you? How the fuck do I know you're not just going to go back on your word like the last guy? Because I know what it is like to suffer from abuse, and because I am far too high profile for Endeavor to try to silence and get away with it. I'm also one of the few people that can investigate your father quietly enough that he won't know until he is being arrested. If I tell you no, are you going to stop investigating? Of course not. Endeavor is committing crimes. And your brother has been signed up for UA's recommendation exam. I would rather have my prospective students safe in their own homes. Why do you even want me to be a hero? Simple, I would rather have an underground hero that does his job, than a high-profile hero that is corrupt and abusive for the sake of a number. I'm going to have to get back to you on this. The answer is still likely going to be no, but I'll get back to you on this. Line break to the city beneath the sea. This city was hell. It has been hell for several hundred years. Just enough sane people to control the splicers on the promise of Adam. Just enough people intelligent enough to realize that they live at the bottom of the ocean. If one window crack, an entire building is flooded. Maybe at one point the buildings had been built to withstand that. For the doors and walls to keep the water contained to only that room. Now the city would be gone if something like that happened. Hell, it was even worse after the destruction of the thermal power station. While the city had one primary power station, it did have several redundancies in the form of several backup stations, though the city had run on backup generators for longer than it should have. Ever since the original civil war in Rapture, the city has barely clung to life, only kept alive by this decade's new ruler. The first was Ryan, then was the short reign of Fontaine. Then came Lamb, then another, and so forth. One decided he was the reincarnation of Jack, a later ruler was simply a cruel conqueror. Not all of them were bad though. One decided that all of Rapture's knowledge needed to be maintained and reclaimed all that she could, sectioning the sane people away from the splicers in a building she had cleared of hostiles with an army of robots. Another saw that the city was quite literally falling apart and managed to get the buildings repaired, even managed to make a few new ones. The one thing all of them had in common, they all controlled the atom. One of the more controversial rulers found where the big daddies and big sisters were made, and decided that he could use them. He took their suits, took the genetic engineering that made them, and did it all over again. Remaking the big daddies and big sisters, not as guards for little sisters but as guards for all of Rapture. A police force that worked for him. Yet he did as he promised and made Rapture as safe as he could in his life. A life that had ended long ago. Thankfully the Big Daddy's sisters were never sent through the mental conditioning of their predecessors, which led to them being trusted by many sane people, which led to future rulers doing similar things. After his death though, the splicers reclaimed much of the territory that he and his guard had taken. There weren't a lot of sane ones left. 5 buildings out of 70. A population of 300, out of Rapture's, miraculously, remaining 8,000 people. Many were debating whether they should try to make it to the surface. Especially now that the splicers had been united by a splicer. The man had come from the surface about 10 years ago, said he was a representative of a group called the Hero Commission. Apparently the surface had actual superheroes now. He had a quirk that let him read people's emotions and, as the Rapturians later learned, influence their choices. The guy was doing exactly what Ryan said surface people would do. Try to take Rapture for themselves. That problem solved itself when he had gone to reason with the splicers, not believing them when they told him of the dangers, or so they thought. Turns out everything he said was true, except he wasn't allowed to come down here. He simply saw power in the form of plasmids and foolishly came down to take it. Using modified bathyspheres, he would take things he had found in Rapture to the surface, including, according to the reports, a bronze statue that dragged like a corpse. Now though he was leading the charge against their doors. The remaining sane of Rapture were evacuating, and the guards of the sane were mobilizing. Line break to Izuku at the same time. It had been a few days since he had taken a new quirk from the shipment of plasmids, tonics, and Izuku realized something was wrong. He wanted more, like his body craved it. He stared at the plasmid in his hand. Using newly discovered genetic proximity and duplication characteristics, you can cross distances in the blink of an eye. Teleportation. Be there. It went on to describe that to teleport one has to place an invisible beacon and that they could move to that beacon from anywhere within several miles. The beacon could be placed from a distance. Izuku still didn't know why he was doing this, but he readies the syringe anyway. Chapter 4. This chapter takes place 8 months before the entrance exam. Disclaimer. I do not own My Hero Academia or BioShock. Line break into the story. It turns out that Nezu was right. The police did let Dabi go, on the condition he didn't act as a vigilante again. They were likely watching him now, though. He still believed that the mouse, dog, bear thing had something to do with that. It had been several days since his talk with Nezu. During his talk with the sapient animal, Nezu had asked for as many details as Dabi could give him in regards to the actions of Endeavor. And Dabi had, somewhat numbly, replied to the best of his ability. The quirk marriage, the spousal abuse, the neglect of the 2 middle children. The child abuse disguised as training. Dabi hated that the most. Memories of his charred flesh came to mind. Burned from Endeavor and his own quirk as he was forced to push past any safe limits, beaten until he coughed blood. Dabi wondered if Shoto still went through similar training. Now, though he was finally allowed to leave the hospital, he could finally get away from the rodent that was far too smart for his own good. He wanted to hate the principal. But if he could take down Endeavor, that would complete Dabi's biggest life goal. Dabi ran his fingers through his hair, which he noted that he would need to dye again. His naturally red hair was starting to show through. His burns were still there, just very faded compared to what they used to be. No longer being forced to staple himself back together was a God-sent gift that Dabi was disappointed would only last until he used his quirk again. The most annoying thing about the guy is his compelling arguments. If you were an underground hero, it would give you the authority to investigate the quote-unquote fake heroes you hate so much. You could take them down. Keep those who take advantage of their positions from any position of power and from harming those you do wish to protect. And so many other similar statements. When Dabi mentioned that he did not even finish high school, and therefore couldn't be a teacher, Nezu had offered to personally tutor him. Though the mammal had mentioned that he would be an assistant teacher, not a full teacher yet. If only one word was used to describe Nezu, it would be persistent, though he did seem to know when to back off. After that, Nezu left him with his personal number. Dabi, who would normally give sarcastic and scathing remarks, was still dazed by what was happening. He honestly did not know how to feel as he walked out of the hospital. Someone believed him. Someone might be doing something about Endeavor's cruelty. He refused to truly get his hopes up. As he was walked into the lobby, Dabi saw a young woman. A familiar one with shoulder-length snow-white hair with several crimson streaks in it. She was talking to the receptionist. Dabi wasn't actually trying to listen in, but overheard Fuyumi anyway. Excuse me. The receptionist gave a, "How can I help you?" "I'm looking for my brother's room. He was recently administered to this hospital. His name is Tuya Todoroki. I just heard earlier today." "Well, nope and nope. By this point Dabi was fast walking out of the hospital. He was not ready to deal with that. He really shouldn't be surprised though. He had been assumed dead, and had spent a good deal of time unconscious. They hadn't even talked to him yet. It made sense that they would inform his family that he was alive and in a hospital. He loved his siblings, but he really didn't want to talk to them right now. And the bastard sperm donor definitely knew. Great. As Dabi made his way out of the hospital, he took an immediate turn towards the nearest train station. He did not manage to calm down until he was lost in the crowd, all waiting for a train. That lasted until he saw Fuyumi again. This time looking very downcast as she made her way to the front of the crowd. When the train pulled in, Dabi made the effort to pick a different car than her. When Dabi sat down, he closed his eyes and gave a deep sigh. He didn't really know where he was going. Having no interest in going back to his crappy apartment, he pulled out his phone and checked the train's route. Line break to the mall. Dabi walked out of the salon with several new bottles of hair dye. He always hated his naturally crimson hair. It looked too much like him. His mother could never look at it without flinching. Sometimes after a nasty beating she would panic at his approach. That almost hurt more than what Endeavor did to him. That at times she was beaten so badly that Rei Todoroki was no longer capable of recognizing her oldest and youngest. She could only see the Endeavor in them. Once after she tried to protect Shoto, the monster had taken his anger out on her. She had a panic attack so badly she could no longer recognize Shoto. She took a steaming tea kettle and dumped its contents on the left side of the child's face. That was the last time any of the Todoroki kids had seen her, at least to Dabi's awareness. Though he hasn't been there for a long time, so maybe his siblings had found out where she was being held. Not Shoto though, he wasn't even allowed to interact with his siblings. Endeavor considered them distractions. No, the flaming trash can would never let his youngest near his mother, it would distract Shoto from his training. She was now in a mental institution. Yet no one ever asked why. They believed Endeavor when he played the victim. That his psychotic wife had snapped and needed to be contained. The kids knew better though. She was lucid when she was taken. The hurt and regret plain to see in her eyes. Dabi was scowling as he walked through the mall. Remembering the past always pissed him off. It didn't help that one of the medical staff at the hospital had gone to a reporter with the fact that Tuya Todoroki was still alive. Thankfully his face was not plastered all over the news, but it annoys him to no end that a bunch of reporters were trying to cash in on his survival. Even going so far to say that Endeavor must be overjoyed to have him back. As if his sperm donor would be happy that he was alive. As if he would ever go back to him. Looking around he decided to find something to calm himself. His eyes found a green-haired teenager leaving a hero merch store. Apparently there was a sale on All Might merch. All Might was a topic Dabi did not know what to think of. While he did not worship the man like everyone else, he could at least respect that the man doesn't actually care about his number. He cared more about keeping people safe instead of proving himself. That is why he was named the symbol of peace. That's what the bastard never understood. All Might was a symbol first. He got his number because he gave people hope. Endeavor is not a symbol. He's just another hero to rank by fan vote. Though Dabi found himself frustrated at the idiot of a hero. He was constantly saving people, nobody is denying that, but he, in Dabi's mind, is acting like a shiny coat of paint. The hero system was filled with corrupt men like his father, but nobody sees this. Because All Might is there telling them everything is okay. You cannot fix a problem if you do not recognize its existence. Dabi shook his head and continued on his walk to find something to do. Eyeing a music store, Dabi decides to enter. When he is inside, he sees the same green-haired kid from before looking at a pair of All Might-themed headphones. This time Dabi rolls his eyes at the obvious fanboy. Seriously, the kid already had 2 large bags full of All Might junk, he really needs more. Walking to a shelf, Dabi begins looking through the music. After a while he finds a few albums he might be interested in. Walking to the counter, he pays for his new music. The green kid had apparently decided that he needed the limited edition headphones. Dabi doesn't get it, the headphones aren't cheap. Why bother getting them just because a hero's face is on it? Oddly though, Greenie didn't seem as exited as most fanboys are when they get their favorite stuff. He looked like he was trying to distract himself. Huh. Maybe talking to this kid can help distract both of them from whatever thoughts are eating them. Yeah, he knew how it would look. Grown man of 24 talking to a teenager he doesn't know, he just does not care. It's not like he has negative intentions. Hey kid. The green boy turns to look at him as they leave the store. You okay? Huh, was the boy's response. I asked if you were alright. You look like you're freaking out on the inside. Oh why yeah, I'm fine. The smile he gave didn't quite feel real to Dabi. It didn't reach the boy's emerald eyes. No offense, but you don't sound it. And Dabi meant that the kid sounded, well, tired. I guess why are you even asking? No one else ever bothers. Dabi gave a shrug. Honestly, no one bothered to help me when I needed it. Well, that and I could use a distraction myself. Buying stores out of hero merch probably won't help for long. Dabi held out his right hand, after shifting his stuff into his left. Name's Dabi. You? The kid eyed his hand for a moment before placing his large bag on the floor and shaking Dabi's hand. Izuku Midoriya. So kid, wanna go to the food court and bitch about our issues? The kid snorts in amusement before leading the way. When they arrived, they both grabbed something to eat. So shorty, what's eating you? The boy Midoriya stared at Dabi for a brief second. My quirk mostly. Dobby raised an eyebrow. You see, I have a condition that caused it to manifest late. I just got it about a week ago. Condition? So it was rude, but Dobby was doing this to distract himself from his own thoughts. It's called Quirk Development Disorder, or QDD. It is really rare apparently, but can cause all kinds of issues. Mine thankfully weren't health problems, said Midoriya. I've heard of that before, but I don't remember much. And Dobby did remember hearing about it before. He thinks he thought he had it at one point. He doesn't, his weakness was just a part of his quirk. Basically, it affects how a quirk develops. It can drastically slow down a person's ability to adapt to their own quirk. Or like in my case, it stopped my quirk from coming in till much later in life. The kid looked nervous for a moment before asking, so what about you? Dobby quirked an eyebrow. You haven't gone through all of yours yet? Midoriya looked at him, then gave a sigh. Fine, so that means I was quirkless for the first decade plus of my life. I was bullied heavily for that. When I went to get help from my teachers, they would either laugh, join in the bullying, or tell me to stop lying for attention. One teacher still goes so far as to tell me that I'm less than human, as if I should be punished for something beyond my control. That hit a little too close to home for Dobby's liking. What about your parents? Please let them be good people. Oh well, my father left us after the doctor announced me quirkless. He didn't want a worthless son. So he left because I couldn't breathe fire like him, or use a telekinetic pull like Mom. So what Dobby gets from this is that fathers with fire quirks are universally shit. And Mom, well, she had enough on her plate just taking care of me. She didn't need more problems because of me. Midoriya, if your mother cares about you in the slightest, those words would horrify her. Dobby knew what it was like to have a mother that genuinely cared. Even if she was broken, she cared. Yeah, I know. I tend to overthink things. Midoriya admits this sheepishly. Anyway, so I wanted to be a hero my whole life, inspire and protect people. I had to push myself to even come close to accomplishing that dream. Then I basically get a quirk on a silver platter. A hero, huh? Going for all that fame, are you? Dobby drawled. At this, Dobby kind of wrote the kid off. Not really. I mean, it would be nice, but I couldn't care less about being popular. I just want to help people. The kid looked so earnest, saying that Dobby actually believed him. And that was more refreshing than he thought it would be. Really, not a lot of people like that out there. He meant that. It was sad, but all his life experience said it was true. That's why I want to be a pro hero. To help the people that get ignored by the glory hounds. Midoriya paused for a moment. I've been cleaning Dagoba Beach for the past couple of months. It isn't a lot, but most heroes forget what the job was at first. A community service. I'm trying to remember that. I know it probably sounds stupid. The kid sounded unsure of himself, and Dobby wasn't having that. No, that's more than what most pros do for the people. Keep doing what you're doing, kid. You'll go far as a hero. Dobby looked Midoriya in the eyes as he interrupted him. He held the kid's gaze for a few seconds. The young hero in training smiled at that. Dobby gave a small chuckle before asking, so what is your quirk anyway? Midoriya gave an over-exaggerated serious look, only if you tell me yours too. Dobby snorted, sure kid, you first. Well, I have a mutated version of both of my parents' quirks. Dad breathes fire. I can emit blue fire from my body. Mostly my hands, because I'm so new to it. I also have a good resistance to heat. That threw Dobby for a loop. Kid had a similar quirk to himself. Well, without the whole burning himself alive thing. I also have a stronger form of telekinesis. Mom can pull small objects to herself. I can lift and throw a car with it. I'm not limited to pulling like Mom is. Dobby gave a whistle at that. It was an impressive combination. I also have a form of strength enhancement. We think one of my parents have one that is hard to notice. Dobby blinked a couple of times at that. The kid could probably do a lot as a hero with those quirks. Well kid, we've got something in common. At this, Dobby held up his left hand and snapped his fingers. A small blue flame the size of his thumb appearing. hovering above his thumb like a flame from a lighter. The fire was gone just as quickly. Midoriya's eyes widened at this and he asked in surprise, "Seriously, you have blue fire too? You don't need to concentrate it?" "Nope, it's just normally blue. It takes a conscious effort to weaken it until it turns red. Though unlike you I only have heat resistance on my hands. Mom had cold resistance. So I've got that on nearly everything else." Is that why you have faded burn scars all over your face?" "More than just the face, kid, and they weren't faded until just a few days ago. Modern medicine and specialized quirks treatments, they work wonders. Used to have to hold myself together with surgical staples, the burns were so bad." That's good. Ah, not the burns, the no longer needing those thing. Yeah, that. Midoriya stammered out. "Yeah," Dabi says, before giving a sigh, "so I guess it's my turn." "I guess," though Midoriya stated that Dabi did not need to if he did not want to. "Tempting, but I made you spill, so it's my turn to bitch." Hell, Dabi was a man of his word. Midoriya nodded as Dabi started. "So I got arrested for vigilantism a few days ago." The look on the freckled kid's face was hilarious to him. Midoriya stammered out a, what?" "Yeah, that happened. So when I woke up the cops did the whole interrogation thing, as they do. And when they were done Nezu walks into the room and offers me a job." Dabi, while annoyed that all that happened, can at least take solace in the green bean's look of disbelief. It amused him. "Wait, what? You're a vigilante?" the kid asked in surprise. "I mean, it was a first offense. Technically, as far as anyone knows. The police left me with a warning and told me not to do it again." Dabi was having more fun messing with this kid than he probably should. But it was not like he lied. "Anyway, I rescued a kid from a killer. My reward was being shot by a cop and the killer getting away because I was covered eye scars and staples. I looked more intimidating." Okay, so I'm still reeling from the stuff you said earlier. Principal Nezu of UA offered you a job?" "Yup. He wants me to be a licensed hero," Dabi said with a blithe tone. "Not gonna lie, I don't think I was supposed to tell anyone that. But you're not the only one that needs to get some stuff off their chest." "Assuming I believe you, how is that a bad thing?" Midoriya looked pensive as he asked this. Dabi gave a sigh. "Well, this kid spilled his guts. Just keep what I'm about to say quiet, kid." Dabi gave Midoriya a look until he got a nod. "So have you heard about that Todoroki guy that was found?" Midoriya's eyes widened as Dabi continued, "That's me. The Great Endeavor is a shit person. You can take that to its worst, kid." Midoriya, remembering that he promised to keep quiet, asked quietly in disbelief, "You're the kidnapped Todoroki?" "Run away. Not kidnapped." Dabi was quick to correct, "I left under my own power. The media just latched onto the kidnapped thing because everyone loves a tragedy." The melancholy tone in Dabi's voice must have spoken for itself. The kid looked torn between believing him and not. "The problem with Nezu offering me a job, I don't like heroes, kid. I grew up under one and it was hell. The training he put me through left me with those burns you commented on earlier." But he's a hero. Did he really?" Midoriya looked devastated that such a thing could be done by a hero. Dabi shook his head. "That's why all that is a problem for me. That's why I can't stand talking heroes with most people." Dabi gained a serious look and said, "Midoriya, listen to me. Being a good person will make you someone's hero, basically no matter what. Being a pro-hero does not make you a good person. There's more corrupt heroes than there ever should be. Trust me, I know." The devastated look on Midoriya's face never left. "How do you know?" "Because when I went for help I got what you did. Some heroes and cops laughed thinking I was joking or some shit. Others told me that I was just a kid looking for attention. A few said, 'I know, it's not my problem.'" The kid's face changed to a look of understanding. Looking down at his food, Midoriya asked, "Nobody believed that a hero would do that?" I ran away to find a way to bring the old bastard down. Then when I woke up in the hospital, Nezu's there with a job offer and a promise to look into Endeavor. That's what I needed when I was your age, kid." The look on Dobby's face was hard to describe before he gave a sigh. Then as I was leaving the hospital, my sister was asking the woman at the desk for my room number. I haven't seen her in about 7 years. She didn't recognize me as I walked out the door. Midoriya gained a curious look as he asked, "Why did you do that?" Dobby actually looked depressed as he said, "Because I feel like I failed. It's been 7 years and the monster is still called a hero. It's been so long and he's still walking free. My youngest brother still lives with him. You try looking your siblings in the eyes after that." The kid nodded in understanding. He didn't really, he couldn't, but it was close enough. "Are you going to accept the job?" Midoriya asked. "I don't know, kid." Dobby then asked, "Can you keep this quiet, kid? I don't even know if you believe what I said, but I would rather not end up on the news more than I already am." "Oh, sure." Midoriya checked his phone for the time. "Oh dang, I'm going to be late." As Midoriya went to get up, he thanked Dobby for the talk and bid him goodbye. Line break to Rapture and my OCS. The city had been a war zone for 380 years. The only moments of peace were when a compassionate ruler was in charge. They never lasted long. The city had been founded in 1952 by Andrew Ryan. It entered civil war in 1958 with forces led by Ryan and Frank Fontaine, under the alias of Atlas. The Civil War was ended by Jack Ryan, Andrew Ryan's mind-controlled son, when he killed his father. Then Jack killed his slaver, Fontaine, and made his way to the surface with all the kids he rescued. The fighting never stopped. Sophia Lamb gained control of the city by using her psychological training to manipulate the minds of those that were left. She forced the man who became a father to her daughter to commit suicide with the hypnotized plasmid. An Alpha Series Big Daddy named Delta. The man woke up from death and went to war to get his child back. Sophia was trying to turn her daughter, Eleanor, into a utopian by forcing all of the atom, and with it all the memories of every person in the city into her. A fate the girl did not want. Together Delta and Eleanor tore a swath through Rapture's mad population. The father knew the history. Every sane person in Rapture learned it in class. And Rapture's bloody history was never more apparent to him than now as he drove his drill into the head of another spider splicer. He quickly moved on to his next target, blasting them with Winter Blast. When the splicer was frozen, he smashed her to pieces with a smack of his gargantuan drill. As the fragments that used to be a mad woman fall around him, he put his drill away, replacing his weapon with his ion laser. He unleashed hell upon a group of splicers attempting to take the path to the Sane's Refuge, the home of all the remaining sane people of Rapture. The father is a member of the Sane Guards, Big Daddy's Big Sisters. He wears a modernized and removable version of the Lancer series Big Daddy armor. Though modernized may be giving the state of technology a compliment it doesn't deserve, it is still more than enough to deal with most things that come his way. As were the plasmids all members of the Guard were given. "Just give me the fucking atom. It's in your blood, I know it is. I know, and it will be mine," yelled one of them. The madness ate at its victims until barely a mind remained. As a brute splicer charges at him, the Guard simply continues to mow down anything that he is capable of sighting. Just as a brute is about to collide with him, a loud and all too familiar screech resounded within the room. For a smaller figure collided with the overly large splicer. Smaller as it was, the sleek form easily flung the heavy man into a wall with significant force. As the splicer found himself dazed, the clearly female form raised her hand and he found himself floating before being flung down the path he came. Then she flung multiple fireballs down the corridor, collapsing the hallway in the process. They made sure to memorize which places could challenge the structural integrity of the building before doing such things. This big sister was the adopted daughter of the father, a child who was found among the splicers when she was an infant. It was theorized that she was the child of a splicer, but she had clearly been abandoned when the father had found her. She had become a sister in the year previously, being only 15 years old. She was wearing a genuinely modified version of the Big Sister armor, as it no longer had the massive cage on the back, and while she still had the long needle, it could now be switched out for a long blade. Other than that, the suit looked largely the same as its predecessors. They had been assigned to protect this path so that the splicers could not kill any of the population. They had been stationed here several days ago and the waves of splicers came and went. From what they could tell from the shortwave radio, the madmen were attacking other places when they weren't attacking here. Over the last several days, the remaining people who were not killed in the initial attack had managed to get into contact with the Hero Commission on the surface. As Rapture was located only 433 kilometers west of Reykjavik, the capital of Iceland, they had sent someone to the surface in a submarine to the city. They knew Rapture was being observed by the Commission, so they hoped that that was where the observers were stationed. The Commission agreed to help evacuate on the condition that Rapture remain a secret. Apparently most on the surface had some kind of quirk, a superpower. As it had been explained that if it was discovered that one could alter their DNA with plasmids, criminals from all over the world would try to get a hold of them. After what plasmids did to Rapture, they needed no convincing to agree. The evacuation had been slowly happening ever since. From what the guard understood, their charges would be safely on the surface by the end of the day, then it would be their turn. Fat lot of good that will do most of the guard, the father thought sardonically. Most of us are dead and more are dying all the time. There was a particularly worrying sound coming from the radio. A gurgling sound that was much dissimilar to the sound of the splicer whose throat was stabbed by his daughter. He raised his shotgun and shot a spider splicer in the head as it was leaping at his child, before changing to his drill and performing a drill dash at a brute with several lead heads near him. The brute howled in pain as the drill made contact, grabbing the father's arm and forcing it to the side, before trying to grapple with the Big Daddy. This was a mistake as the Big Daddy channeled electrobolt into his limbs and used it on the brute before slugging him with the drill several times, killing him. At this, the lethal diver picked up the body and threw it at the splicers near him. One did not get out of the way in time and was crushed under the body. He died as the father threw fire at the group. When he turned around, he saw his daughter standing guard, as she had already killed off her group. "Come on, help me set up more traps. Never know when the next wave will come." He handed her several traps to set up. He looked around the room, noting the 30 or so splicers they just killed. What a waste. Yet that did little to stop them from occasionally looting the corpses as they were setting up traps. I mean, yeah, but what can you do? They're splicers. Killing them is kind of our job, she replied cheekily. True. I'm just glad you don't glorify the killing like some of the others. His child gave a in response. Well, you would have grounded me if I did. I still remember what you did to the other rookie. Scrubbing toilets for months. I don't think so. She gave an exaggerated shiver at this. Having finished with the task of setting traps, both just talked as they reloaded and maintained their equipment. It helped calm them. He abandoned his post to chase bragging rights by killing as many splicers as he could. That was an official reprimanding, not a grounding. There's a difference? She asked with as much humor in her voice as she could muster. They leaned long ago. That banter helped to keep them calm, even if it was forced or awkward. For you? No, I'm not called the drill sergeant for nothing, the father said with a smirk. I thought that was because it's your favorite weapon. You even wield it with an armor it is not designed for. The humor was actually real this time. Oh haha. I will have you know, mocking the drill is punishable by dish duty. Once more she gave an exaggerated motion, this time placing her hands to her chest, doing her best to portray hurt even through the helmet. He gave a sigh and asked, but seriously, how is your Eve? Got enough bullets? How are you holding up? I'm fine, Dad. Not even injured this time. Could use a few more pistol bullets, and I've got metabolic Eve, remember? And we've been fighting on and off for several days. I have some extra Eve hypo. If you need it, take one. I should be good, Dad. I don't sense anyone coming, do you? No, I don't. That was something the guard as a whole was thankful for, regardless of its origin. The ability to sense Adam was very useful in detecting ambushes and maintaining the location of allies when it was trained properly. It was like a glow in their mind. The more Adam, the brighter the glow. At this point, splicers were basically beacons. The biggest issue with the ability was that it originated from the Little Sisters, Children that had been mutilated without choice to be turned into atom factories. Though there haven't been any little sisters in centuries, many people with a conscience still got a bad taste in their mouth at the thought. The daughter gave a sigh of relief. When will we be able to pull out? It shouldn't be much longer now. Getting help from the people topside sped up the evacuation tremendously. Standing at 7 feet 4 inches, the father looks down at his child at her 6 feet 5 inches. She was tall for her age even before she went through the big sister-specific genetic alterations, and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're making me proud, kid. Just a little longer." As the daughter was about to speak, the radio interrupted her. "Attention all guards. The evacuation is nearing completion. Your service has been greatly appreciated and you will not be forgotten." What? The confusion was evident in the daughter's tone, and the father shared her sentiment. "I'm sorry for this, but the splicers have killed most of you by this point. We can't risk allowing you to retreat. That would let them in. You have been trained to sacrifice for the sake of the sane. This is one of those moments." The father stood stiffly. He grabbed his radio with urgency. "Command what the he was cut off as a tremor knocked him off his feet. The daughter yelled into the radio. What was that? They got a response from another member of the guard. An explosion. God, they just destroyed them. They destroyed the sane's refuge. They're leaving us to die." The individual continued to panic. "How do you know?" The father had to know. The panicked guard managed to calm himself enough to say, "I'm next to a window. I watched it happen. Here's what's going to happen. If you can make it outside, do it. Our suits are designed for it. If your suit is damaged, regroup with others and make it to a bathysphere." The father started to give orders. Even if they were trained to deal with the worst Rapture had to throw at them, this wasn't expected. "Sound off. How many are left?" 12, that's it." He did his best to remain calm, but the dread was seeping in. He looked at his child as he sensed the approach of numerous splicers, a glow through his mind. "Get ready." Line break to Izuku. Some time later, Izuku was in the process of wrapping each and every syringe. He decided that he had left them on the beach, where they could be found by anyone, long enough. They had to be moved somewhere safe. Especially since he told that Dobby guy that he was cleaning the beach. He might come by just to see the progress out of curiosity. That and they were distracting. As long as they are here, he won't get any work done. He momentarily looked at the one in his hand. He had not even looked at the label, yet he wanted it. By this point he could no longer pretend to be clueless as to why. He was addicted to this atom that all of the DNA-altering serums were made of. It took an actual conscious effort to wrap it up with its tape. Sonic boom. He was taking the empty syringes as well. It would not do for someone to come across those. As he placed the last of them into his bag, he chose to explain the bag away to his mother by showing her the large, antique, tape recorder. He would record the data on the tapes into several notebooks and audio files on a USB drive. Chapter 5. Katsuki hated many things. He hated feeling weak. He hated feeling regret for kicking the shit out of the nerd, stupid Deku. He hated that he had to. If he didn't, the nerd would try to be a hero. Deku would just get himself killed. It was the heroic thing to do. He hated how it wrenched and twisted his gut when he heard the shitty loser was attacked by a villain. He hated the nerd for proving him wrong. He hated that the shitty nerd won his fight against the bastard. But he was glad that he was okay, and he hated that he shouldn't care. He hated how he and everyone else beat Deku down, only for the fucking idiot to turn around and smile, to ask if anyone else needed help. He hated how that was all for nothing because now Deku has a quirk, 3 quirks. The shitty nerd has fire, telekinesis, and strength, yet he still lets himself get laughed at. Why the fuck was Deku not standing up for himself? It has been 3 months since Deku was attacked. The shitty nerd got his quirks a little under a month later. Katsuki would have assumed that the nerd would have screeched that in joy for all the world to hear. He would have thought that the loser would have run up to him and yelled in joy, "I have a quirk now, we can be friends again." But the shitty nerd never did. He hated that. He hated that Deku had told literally no one over those 2 months. The teachers knew, of course. They had actually been kinder to Deku. Which, now that he thinks about it, has some pretty sick implications, especially because simply being kind to him was such a jarringly obvious difference. He knew he was not the only one to notice. His classmates were confused when their homeroom teacher was actually kind of nervous around him. Well, not really nervous, more like very awkward. Deku tends to just glare at them like they personally offended him. They probably did, considering one of the teachers had been fired and arrested for abuse. After the nerd got his quirk, Katsuki noticed that it only happened after the nerd got his quirk. The students, however, knew jack shit. When he asked the extras that follow him around all the time what they thought of it, they thought he was joking. Deku has a quirk? Come on, Katsuki, if you're going to say something ridiculous, at least make it funny. He did make sure to remind them that he dislikes being mocked or talked back to. He most definitely hates being ignored, which is what found Katsuki Bakugo outside of Deku's home. He had just knocked on the door only for Deku to open it, clearly about to head somewhere other than school. Not that Katsuki can blame him for that, it is about 3 hours too early for that. He chose to come here to get answers instead of going on his usual morning jog, knowing of course that the nerd has a similar morning schedule. Deku was wearing a tank top and sweatpants, and those stupid fucking bright red shoes. Fuck those eyesores. His muscles were clearly defined, even more so than Katsuki's own. At least the shitty nerd actually worked for his dream. That was respectable, not that he would ever tell anyone that. And of course Katsuki realized that he needed to push himself harder, because he would not be physically weaker than Deku. Hey, said Deku. I have some questions for you, Deku. Katsuki wasted no time. Deku sighed before saying, I'm surprised it took you this long to do this. Before gaining a more serious look and saying, look, you can either follow me or this will wait until school. What? Katsuki asked harshly. The nerd did not just blow off Katsuki fucking Bakugo. You and everyone else have had your quirks for all your lives. I have 7 months to master mine. I'm not going to waste my training time to satisfy your curiosity and ego. Deku deadpanned at him before asking him, would you do that? Fucking little. Fine, I'll follow you. Mostly because he can't argue that. He would not waste his time for someone else. What the hell do you even do to train anyway? Deku walked past him and said, I usually start with a 5-kilometer run to Dagoba Beach before I start to clean after school. In the morning I run the 5 kilometers to the beach, then 5 back before doing some weightlifting at home. Clean? What the fuck? I asked you about fucking training. Katsuki growled as he started running beside him. Yeah, you did. I plan on having the entire thing clean by the time of the entrance exam. Said Deku as if that was an answer to what he asked. Deku had the nerve to roll his eyes before saying, there's a lot of trash on the beach of all weights and sizes, making it perfect for strength training. Well, that and a willingly done community service will always look good on a resume. It's also isolated enough to train my quirk in private, since, you know, no one goes there at all unless they're illegally dumping trash. Katsuki grumbled to himself as that actually made some sense. Deku continued by saying, then I also train in improvised weaponry, and a combination of martial arts. Deku then looked at Katsuki with a slight glare, at least he thinks it was a glare, it looked a little like a pout. With that baby face and freckles it was actually hard to tell, which pissed him off, and said, and of course you remember my hero analysis. Oh right. He burned one of Deku's notebooks and tossed it out of a window. The same day he told him to take a swan dive off of the school's roof. Then the guy had been attacked by a villain. Then he was mocked by everyone after winning. Seriously, that would have been a completely shitty day for anyone. Yeah, it kind of made sense that the shitty nerd had been so uncharacteristically rude for the past couple of months. Instead of saying any of that, Katsuki teased and said, yeah, I remember your creepy-ass stalker books. Not that he ever actually read them, he didn't know what was really written in them. Deku gave a displeased him before going on to say, first off, my notes are not creepy, even All Might complimented them when he took the sludge villain. Second, I do not stalk anyone. What I write is stuff anyone could see if they actually paid attention. Outside of All Might, name one hero or even person in general that actually tries to keep their quirk a secret. First off, you better have gotten his autograph. Katsuki would be livid if the hero fanatic wasted the opportunity to get All Might's autograph. Deku looked at him like he was crazy. Of course I did, Kachan. It's now a family heirloom. Katsuki nodded in approval of Deku's response. Second, that doesn't make it any less creepy or stalkerish that you go out of your way find out as much information as you can. At this point they were both starting to sweat. Not at all perturbed by that, they continued to talk. So, Deku looked at him in confusion. So, what? Your quirk, you fucking moron. Katsuki practically yelled. I don't know, you said my analysis was stupid and creepy. Oh, that little fucker is getting too cheeky. Fine, dumb ass. Your shitty assed pathetic fucking useless notes aren't creepy. Happy now? Fucker better be happy. He swears he felt a piece of himself break being so fucking generous. The cheeky little shit smiled and said, yup, thanks Kachan. Fucking Deku. So anyways, I don't really have a name for it yet, so we just went with what the doctor suggested. Superpowers, plural. Deku paused before turning and asking, so what did Auntie actually tell you about it? The old hag told me you've got fire, telekinesis, and strength enhancement. Deku gave a hem in response. I mean, Auntie isn't wrong, but it's really more of an everything enhancement. My skin and muscles are dense enough that they act kind of like an armor, and while it does nothing to increase my senses, it actually increases my overall perception and how much information I can process and remember. Katsuki felt his eye twitch. You're fucking kidding me. Your analysis is actually part of your quirk? Deku slowed his running to a stop and pulled out a water bottle he had in his pocket. After taking a drink, he offered it to Katsuki, who accepted it. Yeah. The doctor believes it was the first part of my quirk to come in. After taking his drink, Katsuki handed the water bottle back to Deku and said quietly to himself in annoyance, of fucking course it was. He looked at Deku as he started his run again. After a few moments he followed. My quirk actually makes me faster and stronger overall, but it's actually focused mainly in my legs. The highest I have jumped so far is about 10 meters, straight up. By this point Katsuki was annoyed. Fucking idiot. Of course all you would think about with leg strength like that is fucking jumping. Those martial arts you've been learning better include kicking, or I'm going to kick your ass. Not at first, but it does now. Deku looked excited as he said, I've been watching videos of heroes like Maruko and Jump Kick to study different kicking-based fighting styles. Katsuki only recognized the number 5 hero's name. The other was probably just some loser only Deku would bother to learn about. Better not just copy their moves, Deku. You'll never amount to anything if you're nothing but a copycat. By this point Katsuki was starting to feel the burn in his legs, not that he would ever let Deku know that. Especially because the bastard didn't even look winded, sweaty sure, but he clearly wasn't feeling the burn from the several kilometer run they have done already. He swears he's going to start pushing himself harder. It hardly matters that, logically, Deku's quirk is likely the only reason for this. He will not be behind the nerd in anything, most certainly not his stamina. Since he managed to get himself annoyed again, he decided to ask a question that had been on his mind. Why the fuck haven't you told anyone at the damn school about your quirk? Deku looked at him weirdly. Because it is not any of their business? It's not like I have any friends to tell. Seriously, if all they did was mock me for being quirkless, why would they be worth it now that I have one? Okay. That hurt a lot more than it should. Fucking Deku. You really expect me to believe you've got no friends at all? Don't lie to me, bastard. Deku looked at him, obviously getting annoyed. Do you ever see me hanging out with anyone? Like ever? A sinking feeling entered his gut even as he scoffed. You really expect me to believe that? Even I have extras that won't leave me the fuck alone. Well, fucking excuse me, but I was quirkless. People don't exactly like to associate with what they consider as less than them on a good day. Deku stopped and looked at him angrily. I'm going to spell it out for you. You are the only real friend that I have ever had. And we haven't been friends since we were 5. If I'm feeling generous and really stretch it, I'll say 7. That is at minimum 7 years of me being little more than the school punching bag. Not just you, everyone. There is not a day that went by that someone wasn't humiliating me, trying to beat the crap out of me, or just outright telling me that I'm worthless. That I should kill myself, and you were not the only one to do that. Hell, even the fucking teachers joined in. Katsuki was surprised by just how aggressive Deku was being. Sure, he had been rude to others for a while now, but he had never actually seen Deku completely pissed before. And he did not like that it was being directed at him. Grr, did you even fucking go for help, or did you just pretend it would stop if you took it long enough? Yes, I did. For years. No one is willing to befriend or help the quirkless freak. Absolutely no one. It's why I gave up trying with you months ago. Now that he thinks about it, Deku had stopped trying to talk to him a ways back. That is why I don't care enough to tell anyone in that school about my quirk. Why I do not put up with the art teacher's attempts to make things right with me. None of them are worth it at this point. Deku turned around and started his run back to his home, but not before saying, "You might have been more or less agreeable for the past few months, but can you really say that if I didn't get my quirk you would even care?" As he watched him leave, Katsuki numbly realized that they had made it to Dagoba Beach as he watched Deku begin to head home. He stood frozen as he came to understand that Deku had it even worse than he had thought. He hated how sick to his stomach he was feeling. It fucking hurt. Line break to school at the end of class as the bell rang for classes to be let out for the day. Izuku sighed in relief. Because honestly, dealing with school was just the absolute worst at this point. The only plus side is that the teachers actually did their jobs now and stepped in to stop the bullies, finally. Though he saw right through what they were trying to do. He knew that they were still being investigated for the abuse that he had went through. He had been very surprised when he had heard that Matsuda-sensei had been arrested. Surprised and, well, ecstatic. What was easily his most abusive teacher was gone. Yahoo! Now he wouldn't be told he was less than human. Or told to kill himself anywhere near as much, or be thrown into walls, or downstairs like that one time. Yes. The bastard is in prison. Then he found out why. A familiar detective had come to his home in order to ask some questions about the teacher's actions and reported negligence. In fact, he had approached Izuku and his mother at home after the arrest. That had not been a fun conversation. Line break to a flashback 2 weeks before. It started simply. Izuku had been watching a Maruko fight on his phone. It was a remarkable video filmed from the sidelines of a fight. It had managed to be filmed at an angle that kept the fight in view the entire time and was of exceptional quality as well. The video had been filmed from a bridge overhanging where the fight took place and had been taken by some tourists with an actual camera instead of a phone. They had kept their hands steady the entire time. After finishing the video for the third time, he once again began writing every form of kick and style that he could make out, even drawing surprisingly detailed drawings of the stances the bunny-themed hero took. He would look up what forms of martial arts they belonged to later, if any at all. There was always a chance that she had actually created several if not all of these stances and attacks. He had always been exceptional at mimicking what he saw others do, being as observational as he was. Uku, of course, as much as he wanted to learn everything he could about her fighting style, and the Idaidan agency sidekick she had teamed up with for this fight, Jump Kick, having come across the sidekick in trouble after his partner had been rendered unconscious by the villain with a movement-slowing quirk, he knew that he had to learn some that he could find more easily as well. Izuku. While all three would be difficult to learn without a trainer, he could start on learning Taekwondo and Muay Thai. Even though he had already become proficient in karate and kickboxing, this would again be very difficult and he will have to work on the basics of each style individually. Izuku. He finally registered his mother calling for him. Yes mom. Izuku called out from his room. Can you get the door? I'm busy at the moment. And with that he now actually heard that yes, someone was at the door. He stood up, still watching a video on his phone. Another Maruko fight, and as he did he placed his open notebook on his forearm so that he could write as he walked. When he got to the door he placed his pen in his mouth so that he could open the door. When he did and saw who it was that was here, he nearly dropped his jaw in shock. Detective Tsukauchi, right? The man nodded. Yep. Glad you remember me, young man. I need to talk to you and your mother about some concerning things. Oh God. Did it have to do with the plasmids? Fuck, was he going to go to jail? Oh no, he can't go to jail. If he does, he'll never be able to be a hero. How did the detective even find out about them? Okay. Izuku, calm down. Calm down. Make sure you understand the situation before you do something stupid, he thought to himself. About what, detective? Izuku was clearly nervous, something the detective picked up on. The detective looked at him with reassuring eyes and said, "Don't worry, you're not in any trouble. We at the station had received a disturbing report involving your school." Sukauchi gave a sigh and asked, "Is your mother here right now?" Izuku was relieved when he realized that the detective knew nothing about his plasmids, but at the same time he wanted to shut the door in the cop's face. After all, the further the cop was from his plasmids, the less chance of them being discovered. He already had to buy a small storage safe to keep them in so his mother would not find them. Instead, however, he simply nodded and asked, "Can you wait here while I go get her?" The cop gave his word as Izuku walked into the house and called for her. When she heard it was a cop, she got to the door so fast he could swear she had a speed quirk. "Oh, officer, please come in." When they sat down, she asked if the officer would like some tea, to which he accepted. He refrained from talking until she'd returned. "If I may ask, detective, what is this about? As I said to your son, we had received a rather disturbing report in regards to his middle school, Aldera Junior High." "Disturbing reports?" Izuku asked. The detective gained a pained look before saying, "Young man, we recently arrested your teacher, Monsuda. We had received a report about the abuse your teachers have been giving you. The source mentioned you by name." Izuku had a hard time breathing as his mother started freaking out. Abuse. What? She looked at him with tears already in her eyes. "Izuku, what does he mean?" Detective Sukauchi gently answered for him as Izuku still had trouble speaking. "Ma'am, what I mean is, once we had been tipped off to what was happening, we gained access to the school's security cameras. When we did, we verified what we were told. One of the videos we looked at showed your son being thrown into a wall by the previously mentioned teacher." As the mother began crying, he finished by saying, "The man has already been arrested. So far he is the only one because of the severity of his actions." Izuku finally regained his breath and quietly muttered to himself, Did he actually tell them? Did he really go to the police?" His mother heard him regardless of how quiet he was, and while weeping hugged her son. She couldn't take this. Her son was being abused by his teachers for who knows how long. And he never told her. Was he afraid? Did they threaten him? Izuku was crying now as well. Granted, he was trying to keep himself more composed, but the tears flowed regardless. She let go long enough to look him in the eyes and ask, Izuku, sweetie, why did you never tell me?" "I didn't want you to worry, Mom. You shouldn't have to worry about me when you already do so much." As Izuku finished his sentence, she burst into renewed heart-wrenching sobs, hugging her son tighter than before. As she did, she continuously mumbled the word, "No," on repeat. The detective looked at them sadly and said, "You never told her," before taking a deep breath and saying, "Young man, I heard what you were saying to yourself there. Would I be correct in saying the man you told was Dabi?" Izuku simply nodded numbly. Sukauchi nodded in return and asked, "You met him at the mall, correct?" Another nod. "After you met him, he called his potential employer, Nezu, the principal of UA, and requested of him to look into this. Nezu contacted us with his concerns." With tears flowing down her cheeks, the heavy-set mother asked, "Who's Dabi?" The detective replied, "He is someone who may be teaching at UA this coming year. He also suffered abuse at the hands of others, so you can imagine the fuss he made when he heard about all this." Oh, that makes sense, Izuku thought. If he was hurt just the same, and nobody helped him, he really wouldn't just ignore the same thing happening to someone else. Inko nodded. She was thankful someone did the right thing. Though with the way her mind was reeling, she realized something the officer said earlier. "Detective, before you made it seem like there was more than one person hurting my Izuku. Why did you say there was only one teacher arrested?" She refused to recognize those people as teachers. "He was the only one who was physically harming your son. As for the others, we need more time to gather evidence of enabling bullies and negligence. Don't worry, ma'am, we will make sure these people can't harm your son or any other kids again. Enabling bullies? What else had her son gone through? This time it was Izuku himself who answered. The other teachers tend to ignore the kids with weaker quirks. They gave me detention once for trying to ruin the reputation of my outstanding peers. Inko's look of horror hurt just as much as he thought it would. The detective's expression made it clear that he believed his every word, and why wouldn't he? After all, Detective Tsukauchi, otherwise known as Truth Man, had a lie detection quirk. Line break back to the present after his mother made him tell her everything. The detective was there to take note of his every word. He told of all the bullying, all the times the teachers simply ignored what was happening. He mentioned how in the past he had gone to teachers with what was happening and how they told him to stop lying for attention. He talked about how he had hoped the teachers in middle school would be different, only for it to be much of the same, with one doing things he had now been arrested for. She had also insisted that the detective thank Dabi for her. As he was now in a sour mood, Izuku stood to leave since the bell rang. Midoriya, please stay behind. I need to talk to you. Izuku adopted a heavily annoyed look on his face. Several of the other students laughed at him but were quickly sent away when the teacher sent them a stern glare. Izuku rolled his eyes. After the rest of the students left the room, the teacher noticed the look on Izuku's face and said, "Look, young man, I understand that you are upset by what Matsuda had done, but you can't take it out on all of us teachers. We did nothing to you." With a deeper glare, Izuku said, "Precisely. I specifically remember you watching what happened and doing nothing about it." The teacher shook his head and said, "You'll have to forgive us eventually." "No, I don't. We both know the school is still being investigated. We both know your best shot at getting away with what you did is to have me defend you. And if your big plan is to once again try to emotionally manipulate me, you really aren't helping yourself." He did not miss the teacher's eyes widen at that. Izuku tuned out the teacher as he walked out the door. Pissed as he was, he knew that he would feel better when he got home. After all, he always felt more alive after he got a new plasmid. You know, there's one that creates blasts of air and sound, kind of like when All Might punches. Could he use plasmids from other parts of his body? Like his feet or mouth? If he could incorporate that into his fighting style. The only reason that he was even still in this school is that he managed to convince his mother not to pull him out. He doesn't really remember what he said to convince her to keep him in the school, but he knows he has a reason to still be here. Line break to Rapture. The commission man watched the screen. The screen was one of many that was connected to a system of thousands of cameras in Rapture. He had been cut out of the camera system owned by Sane's Refuge, so after he gained control of the splicers and altered the bathyspheres to reach the surface, he had made certain to bring as much equipment that his smuggling operations could manage. Rapture was a treasure trove of powerful and advanced technology. He genuinely believed that if the tech of Rapture was in perfect repair, at least some of it could easily contend with Island. That was simply how advanced that the city had been in its heyday. Truly a shame that it all went to hell. If the city had been allowed to survive, it would likely have single-handedly taken the world to heights that absolutely nothing in the modern world had managed to do. Even Island could arguably be referred to as a poor man's Rapture. The island may be the home of the world's most advanced modern technology, but the technological leaps made in Rapture compared to the rest of the world far outweigh what the island has done. Plasmids, tonics, architectural engineering that allowed for a city to be built under the ocean. Those that built this place had been beyond genius. It made him glad that he abandoned his job on the surface to come down here. He had been a national director of the Hero Commission. He had more or less been in charge of an entire country's heroes, but frankly it gave him a lot less power than he really wanted. His quirk allowed him to gradually convince others of what he wanted the longer a conversation went on. Early on, his villainous quirk had cost him much. When he had tried to enter business courses, he had been denied because of the high chance that his quirk could be used illegally. Then the Hero Commission found him. They were very quick to try to get him on their side. After all, the hero's public safety commission needed to remain in control. But it was far too late. He had no real loyalty to the, as he now knew, at least semi-corrupt organization. When he heard about the City of Rapture, its advances and power, he knew he had to have as much of it as he could. Of course he had to get there first, so he had contacted some of his less than, we'll say, heroic friends. He had met them long before he had been recruited by the commission. What did they expect? That he would just live his life in misery before they found him. He had fallen in with several villains and had eventually built connections across multiple countries. What's important is that he had contacted them to help him find a way to Rapture, and they agreed on the condition that he smuggle materials out of Rapture. Mainly raw atom, Eve, already made plasmids and tonics, and finally living people, splicers, and corpses. He happily provided all. After all, he wouldn't be here forever. He had taken everything he will be capable of taking from this sunken ship of a city. His clients in Japan easily had the resources and desire to continue the original work of the Rapture scientists. When he had arrived in the mini-sub, he had introduced himself as a representative of the commission and as such been dubbed the Commission Man by the locals. Over the course of his time among the sane members of Rapture, he had gathered as much information as he could about everything that he could. Then when he was confident that he could survive among the splicers, he went and left the Sane's refuge as quickly as he could. Over the years he had taken over the splicers and taken many plasmids for himself. He had also followed his word and sent as many materials as he could in modified bathyspheres to agreed upon locations. The frozen artist, the bronze corpse, large stockpiles of raw atom and live atom slugs, processed plasmids and Eve. It was a pain to let it all go, but it would be worth it. With the commission moving to assist with the evacuation of the sane population of Rapture, they were sure to make a more complete push to take or destroy the city. The commission man knew that he could not remain in the sunken treasure of a city for much longer. He would likely be able to hide out with several of his friends, perhaps in Japan. They were the ones that bought the most of his genetics equipment, and if he was right, the clients in Japan worked for the boogeyman of the underground. That would offer a great deal of protection. Plus, he still had to get a living sample of the purest plasmid users, i.e. not splicers, to that yakuza in the country so they can study the origin of the disease to better purify it. Well, if they wanted one, he supposed that he could only really use one of the big family to do that. And he had captured a big sister a month ago. And he was looking at a few survivors on screen right now. The Big Daddy was one he recognized. He had far too much experience to capture in any real capacity. The big sister, however, had been much easier to catch unaware. She had been be separated from her father and subdued. Yes, he decided she would be the last product shipped before he got his affairs in order and left this city for good. And he had to leave, for the father had been on the war path to find his daughter. Already he had destroyed several buildings on his quest to find her, and he wasn't stopping anytime soon. Chapter 6. Izuku realized one very clear fact. Using his quirks, plasmids, to clean the beach made cleaning much, much faster. Where before there were piles of trash that easily stood as tall as one-floor houses, now the trash was easily halved. In 4 months and a few days total, he had cleaned half the beach. While, admittedly, he still spent most of that time doing it by hand, even that had become far easier. What, with his newfound super strength and all, he was now, quite simply, lifting about 10 times the amount he could previously. This was proven as he lifted the back tires of a truck completely off the ground to get it out of a ditch so he could push it off the beach. While this placed strain on his arms, legs, and back, it felt more akin to when he first started cleaning, when he first felt a burn in his arms from lifting weights, than the excessively difficult task it should have been. Granted, he was only lifting the back tires, there was no way he would be able to lift an entire truck. Well, not yet anyways, maybe when he was older and stronger. Which reminded him, he needed to get heavier weights for training, he barely even feels the ones he has now. On the topic of training, Izuku would like to think that he was doing fairly well in his martial arts training. He had always been good at mimicking the movements of others, so while he knew that he would be better with professional training, he could at least hold his own in a fight. He had even found a few punching bags in the piles of garbage, 5 in total. He had only gotten a few days' worth of use out of the first before it literally fell apart on him, though the rest are still going strong, having only a few minor problems he fixed with tape. Ah well, that's better than to be expected of things you find in the trash. He didn't know why they were there since the bags were not in terrible condition. Maybe a gym or dojo got shut down and the owner threw them here rather than store them away. Over the past several months his training with his quirks had improved as well. At this point he was confident he was at least at the same level as someone his age who had their quirks their whole lives. Someone like Kachan though, who trained his quirk constantly, would blow him away. Speaking of Kachan, they were not friends. At best the two just sort of tolerated each other. Izuku had considered stopping the childhood nickname, but he just couldn't. He was always Kachan to him. Heck, they were together since they were babies. As it turned out, Izuku was capable of igniting things ablaze with a snap of his fingers, literally. He was able to light a fire by igniting the air particles around an object that he was looking at. Though this method required a line of sight. Beyond that, he also learned that he could in fact use his fire from other points of his body than just his hands. His mouth, for example, which he learned by focusing his EVA on different sections of his body while using his plasmid. When Izuku had that thought at school, he really did not think much of it. However, it would be an invaluable ability to have in case his hands were ever tied or trapped, so he had come to the beach to practice. However, this was after he had taken several other plasmids. Sonic Boom, Hypnotize, and Scout. Those were the plasmids that he took over the past several days. Sonic Boom pretty much did the same thing All Might does with his smashes, except by using sound and air pressure. Perhaps he could hide this one by only using it when he attacks with his strength, preferably his kicks, as he had specified multiple times that his legs were where most of his muscle power was concentrated. Now that he thinks about it, that sounds a bit like an old pro he remembers hearing about once from a documentary about the older generation of heroes. Grand Torin or something like that. He'll have to look into that later. Hypnotize is a bit of an odd plasmid as it creates a glob in the hands of the user. When the glob is thrown and comes into contact with an individual, it will splatter on them. Those that are covered in the substance then become hypnotized by the user, as the name suggests. The plasmid has a time limit, however, as the stuff eventually evaporates. As for Scout, well, it more or less allows for an out-of-body experience. The user's body will grow still, and therefore become vulnerable, yet from the user's perspective they are still very much walking around, albeit with an invisible, intangible psychic body. He is, however, still able to interact with inanimate objects if he so chooses to. While using Scout, one is still capable of using plasmids, so if he comes across an enemy he is still able to use his telekinesis or incinerate. Albeit his Scout state has a finite pool of EV, even with EV Eternal, i.e. while his body will still regain EV, his ghostly form will not. One is only capable of going so far from their actual body in this state, or it automatically takes you out of the Scout state while giving migraines. That distance being a few hundred feet or so. Beyond that, anything happening to the real body will do the same, even a pebble being tossed at them. Oh, Izuku was aware that it would be very odd if he were to go to the entrance exam with multiple quirks that he reasonably should not have. He, after all, according to his quirk registry, has a mutated version of his parents' quirks, but at the same time they would be useful when he graduates and becomes a full-fledged hero in his own right. Which is why he only intended to use the quirks he already showed others, and use those he could pass off as extensions of the ones he already has, since even though his online search through hero forums and other more official places had turned up absolutely no information on plasmids, the closest being an urban legend about a villain that could steal and give quirks, he was still certain the DNA-altering drugs were illegal. He practiced very little with his new powers though, as he knew he would have years to do so while in UA. Oh, he used them, if only to gain an understanding of the abilities and to write down everything he could learn about them. What can he say? Old habits die hard. However, he also did it to see if there were ways he could incorporate them into his style reasonably and with subtlety. For Scout, if he was very careful, he could perhaps use it commonly to do as the name suggests or take down villains before they even see him. Sonic Boom he, once again, could use with his kicking-based style. However, Hypnotize was far too obvious for him to even consider using it like that. Teleport, which he had already taken, was in a similar vein. Useful but much too obviously not something he could have inherited. As Izuku finished moving the truck out of the ditch, he set its tires back on the ground. He started pushing it over to the edge of the beach. The truck, while obviously rusted to hell, was still in reasonably good condition for something that had so clearly been exposed to the elements as it was. Izuku finished pushing it over to the sidewalk where he would call a tow truck to come pick it up like he had with the car from before. And with this he was done actually cleaning for the day. Now the training can begin. He started walking back to the piles of garbage. When got to the trash, instead of cleaning more he walked over to the water. As he got to the edge of the water he started to walk along edge of the trash-covered beach. After a while he came to a clearing surrounded by trash tall enough that the place could not be seen from outside it. This is the area he set aside to practice his quirks and combat skills. The place was a large circular clearing with no trash, only sand beneath his feet, about 20 meters across with an opening, doubling as the entrance, facing the ocean. Set furthest from the water in the clearing there were several punching bags, albeit only one of them set up. There were also multiple makeshift targets, made of metal he found around the beach and set up off to the side for Izuku to practice his quirks on. And practice he did. Having made sure everything was set up for training earlier he just had to start. Entering his practice area, Izuku walked to the center before turning to his left. First he started with his fire, letting loose fireballs of varying size, both as large and as small as he could. As he was throwing fire at the targets he would eventually turn the metal they were made from molten. After doing this to several targets he walked over to the same crate that he found the plasmids in, having moved it into his hidden training ground, picked his pencil up and wrote what he observed from his training in his notebook about the plasmids, his own quirks. He noted that while he lost Eve at a significantly slower rate now he still used up about 3/10 of it in just a few minutes. He really wouldn't be able to maintain continuous use of his quirks. When fighting he is often going to have to use his quirks strategically rather than simply overpower his opponent. Then Izuku walked back over to the targets and took careful note of the condition of the metal itself. While he recognized that the targets had been made of various types of scrap metal he still saw it as important to keep a record of what happened to the targets. He took note that the sand beneath the targets had been turned to glass. Huh, neat, Izuku said. Though that could be an actual problem. Raw firepower like this could cause all kinds of damage if it gets out of hand. Izuku rubbed the back of his neck in thought. I wonder. Suddenly Izuku disappeared in a flash of light before reappearing where he stood previously. As Izuku stared at the targets he raised his hand and started to float his notebook and pen back to the crate. A thought came to him. What if he specifically tried to use as little Eve as he could? Would he still be able to use the plasmid? Did they require a base amount to actually use? If he used less would the fire be weaker? Izuku raised his hand and ignited it in flames and took careful note of how much he was using. He could feel that he had pooled a certain amount of Eve in his hands, but could he lower that amount? He began focusing on using less power and as he did so the fire began to flicker to a red-yellow color. Using even less and it was now completely yellow-orange, occasionally flickering red. Releasing the fire at the target had a noticeable effect as it was nowhere near as strong as before. At the very least it would be useful in reining in on property damage. Although it would require focus on keeping the power contained, but that would be worth it to be able to fight for longer. Staring at the target he let loose with the fire again and smiled as he saw the fire was the same as when he was practicing with the first stage of Incinerate. Being able to limit his power was just as important to being a hero as using all his power. Bringing his notebook back to himself, he wrote all of this in his notebook, detailing it and the feeling of using less as much as he was capable of. When he was done, he once again sent his notebook back, utilizing his constant use of his telekinesis as a form of control training by doing this until it becomes second nature, and then began channeling the Eve to his face and felt his skin start to flake as it turned to ash. He felt no pain as it ignited, the blue fire flowing from his face with his eyes shining through and his hair being licked by the fire. Izuku opened his mouth and shot an azure fireball from it, then another. After doing this with varying amounts of Eve, Izuku began charging his plasmid and eventually released a stream of fire that stretched a good 4 meters in length. He kept this up for a close to 6 seconds before needing to breath. As Izuku sucked in breath, he started coughing. When he was done, he said, it tastes like freaking ash. Don't know what I expected, but I guess tasting ashes wasn't it. He grimaced as he spat on the ground. Izuku gave a sigh as he said, okay, just one final test of my fire before I get to something else. Remembering the first time he used his telekinesis, he had begun to think of another possible way to use his plasmids. When he charges his fire, he is gradually supplying the power with Eve. Yet when he first used his telekinesis, he simply threw the item at full power, using a large amount of Eve at once. Does he even need to waste time charging the plasmid up to use the flamethrower, or can he just use more Eve from the get-go? When he raised his hand and put more power into it, he immediately shot out a torrent of blue flame. He channeled more into it and the fire reached farther and burned hotter. Eventually he ran out of Eve doing this and once again took note of the targets. He sighed, at this point I might as well just make new ones. They were at this point molten liquid on the ground. Guess I'll work on my martial arts while my Eve comes back. Line break to the front gate of UA High School. For once Dabi was actually in a pretty good mood. Not only had Dabi's contacts found a possible lead on the serial killer, Zenkoku, but Nezu had actually done it. It didn't take long for the papers to go wild with the news that a school had knowingly allowed a student to be abused, by a member of their staff no less, and that they had punished the boy for seeking help. The school's reputation was trashed. In fact, it had been so badly damaged that it likely would not open back up again the coming year. Getting past a thank you from the kid's mother had been icing on the cake. Thankfully, Midoriya's name had been kept out of the public eyes and ears. Dabi really didn't want things to be harder on the kid than they already were. He would know. His name was still on the news. Apparently the media was concerned that he had not shown his face to the world. Like he would want to go on television just to brag about being his son. Hopefully that would stop soon. And it had been happening less, so he just had to deal with the annoyance for a little longer. Still, he was glad that he told Nezu about what the kid told him. Though admittedly it had been just as much about testing what the principal would do as it had been about reporting the issue. And Nezu did what he was supposed to. He was willing to talk to the principal about the job offer. Talk to him about it, not accept it. He was not making any decisions in ignorance. Which is what found Dabi at the gates of UA High School. Of course he called ahead to set up a time for this conversation. The mouse dog bear thing told him that he was free to talk today and that when he arrived a teacher would meet him at the gate to escort him to the office. Aizawa or something. He had arrived several minutes earlier and was pleased when the teacher made his way right on time. And honestly, the guy looked dead tired. He was dressed in a black jumpsuit of some sort with a gray belt and had a long gray scarf wrapped around his neck. His black hair was long, though not as long as some other heroes, reaching just past his shoulders. Obviously missed his shave too, likely for several days. His expression stated that he would rather be somewhere else, probably napping if Dabi had to guess. All in all, in Dabi's humble opinion, the man looked like a disheveled homeless man. As he approached him, Aizawa seemed to size him up for a moment before opening the gate. In a tired deadpan, the teacher said, "Follow me, Dabi." "Yeesh pal, you look like the goddamned Walking Dead." "Perfect. This has to be the best conversation starter." Aizawa gave a grunt of acknowledgement. as I've been told before. Then he simply kept walking. As they made their way to the front door, Dobby chose to ask. So I'm pretty sure I don't recognize you from anywhere, you underground. Yes, Aizawa deadpanned. Cool, cool. If I do this, I'm going underground myself. If you do this. Aizawa looked at him curiously. What did the guy not know about Nezu's offer? It would be weird for Nezu not to tell his staff. You know, get a license and all that. Dobby answered. Yes, yes, I know that. Aizawa gave a tired sigh. Still don't agree with what Nezu is doing, but I know. I meant, why are you here if you're not accepting the job? Aizawa asked. I'm not making a decision without all the details. They finally passed into the school proper. I talked to the principal on the phone, but he said this would be a conversation best had in person. I suppose that's logical. Line break to the principal's office. Nezu poured himself a cup of tea as he spoke to the man on the other side of the phone. I'm glad that you've finally agreed to work here, Yagi. The children will learn a lot from you, and of course we here at UA will help you find and teach a successor. Right. Thank you as well, Nezu. Though I will, once again, state that I would rather no one else knows about One for All, spoke the voice of All Might. And I won't tell a soul, but I will, once again, state that you can trust my staff. When you find a successor, they will suddenly have a brand new quirk on top of powering up the one they already have. It really would not be wise to keep the teachers of this, currently theoretical, successor uninformed. Nezu gave his argument. I will consider this. After I choose a successor, not before. There was a loud crash in the background as Yagi gave a sigh. I need to go, there's a villain fight happening nearby. Nezu bid the man goodbye before reflecting on the considerable leeway he was providing the man in this regard. In truth, All Might does not have a teaching bone in his body, well, not yet anyway. But his experience, now that would go a long way in helping the children grow into proper heroes. And speaking of those who would help the students grow into proper heroes, Dobby had arrived a short while ago. He sent Aizawa to fetch the fire-quirked man. And Aizawa had no reason not to. After all, he had just expelled the last of his students this year, making this Aizawa's 154th expulsion since the man started teaching. Evidently, even the students from the other courses that had been transferred to his class had not met his standards, and really they didn't even reach Nezu's own standards. Everything Aizawa told him about his reasons for the expulsions from the hero course Nezu had agreed with. And as for Dobby himself, Nezu could not wait to tell him the ins and outs of that little-known law from way back when. Oh, he knew Dobby's view on heroes was skewered, viciously ripped apart by his own father nonetheless. And he knew the man only entertained the idea of talking to him because he did his job as a hero when he heard about a child being abused, the same child who had defeated a B-ranked villain while quirkless with nothing but a defense taser, who was apparently cleaning Dagoba Beach on his own by hand, who now has a quirk and is applying to his school while possessing notably high grades. Cue maniacal chuckles from Nezu. He also knew how close the man was from falling to something darker if he was not given a chance at something better. And Nezu, well, Nezu would not allow that. Just then the proximity alarms in the hallway outside his office let him know that they had arrived. With a brief glance at the security cameras in the hall, Nezu decided it was time for the fun to begin. He walked over to the door, opening it just as Dobby was about to knock. Come in. Come in. I just made myself some tea. Would you like some? Nezu loved doing this to people, the look of surprise as the door opened like that was always funny. The little things really are enjoyable. Dobby finally lowered his hand and let out an unsure, sure, I guess. More of a coffee drinker myself, but I'll take some. Nezu, without missing a beat, says, heathen coffee drinker. And giggled as Dobby nearly choked on his own spit when Aizawa yells from the hallway, fucking tea rat. Ah, it really is the little things that give the greatest pleasure. As Dobby regains control and takes his tea from the diminutive principal, he takes a seat and says, right, so, you couldn't tell me all this stuff on the phone because there's a lot to go over. So, let's get to it. How would this actually work? I'm too old to continue attending your school having dropped out in the second year, and I doubt you're going to hack the government to get me a license. Ah yes, Dabi had attended UA as a general education student. It had seemed odd to Nezu that the boy had vehemently refused to transfer to the hero course after his performance in the sports festival in his first year. Guess the teacher knows why he did that now, some degree of rebellion against his father being the likely answer. Glad that Dabi was actually thinking on more than just the offer itself. Nezu supplied him with an answer. You are correct on both counts. Dabi raised his eyebrow to signal for Nezu to continue. You see, there is an old law known as the Vigilante Recruitment Clause. The Vigilante Recruitment? What? Dabi was visibly perplexed by this. Yes. You see, the Vigilante Recruitment Clause, or the VRC, had been written and put into effect back in the first generation of heroes. Back when hero schools were new and villains were abundant with few heroes to fight them. The need for the law had quickly run its course, and so it had been forgotten, really lost in the bureaucracy of the Hero Commission's work. But it still is technically in effect, having never been removed. And having checked with several judges and other legal authorities, I have discovered that the law would still be considered in the modern day due to the conditions involved in the law. When Nezu finished, he gave Dabi a moment to process what he just said. Wait, seriously? This law actually exists? The poor man looked so confused. If this VRC exists, why the hell were vigilantes like Knuckleduster or Crawler never made heroes? Because the law had been nearly completely forgotten due to its extremely rare use. I myself had only heard of it this past year. Nezu took a sip of tea before continuing. As it is, the VRC isn't publicized by those that do know of it because that would lead to a large increase in vigilante numbers. And since vigilantism is a crime, well, that's not really recommended. And as for those particular individuals, I intend to approach other schools and agencies in regards to them as well. Though they may have greater difficulty because of how high profile they are for vigilantes. Okay. That's reasonable. While Dabi still looked like he had his mind blown, he had begun to think. Though since vigilantism is a crime, what parts of it would even make this tolerable to the government? I'm so glad you asked. Nezu reached into a drawer and pulled out a thick packet of papers before pushing it towards Dabi. Here I have every aspect of the VRC and we will be going over it. However, I will tell you the important parts now. Nezu took another drink of tea. Dabi, who took the packet, started to skim through it, said. All right, what are they? Nezu gave a smile as he started. Well, first, in order to be eligible for recruitment, one has to be a vigilante that has never taken a life under any circumstances, never caused large amounts of property damage, and never tortured or caused unnecessary cruelty to those they have apprehended. If even one of those happened, the potential recruit is no longer even considered. Dabi nodded as the principal continued. Second, it requires a pro hero to sponsor the vigilante, more or less placing their reputation on the line. The former vigilante will have to shadow the same pro for several months with what basically amounts to a provisional license, meaning you would have to work for the same agency as them, essentially as their sidekick. Okay. And I assume that you're sponsoring me? Dabi asked. Aizawa actually. He stated a desire to keep an eye on you since he knew he can't talk me out of offering this. You needn't worry about him, however. As an underground hero, he has a good working relationship with quite a few of the less volatile vigilantes. Oh, and he works for the UA agency. Wait, the school doubles as an agency? Dabi asked. Nezu gave a jubilant nod. Of course. How else do you think that our teachers remain active pros with their teaching jobs? It helps keep things running smoothly when there's no infighting over their schedules. Some, like one of our new hires, own their own agency, but most work for the school itself. Granted, not every hero school does this, but the big names tend to. UA and Shiketsu being two of them. Dabi nodded slowly as he digested that information. Huh, guess that makes some sense. Dabi said quietly. Anyways, Third, it makes clear that one must work at a hero school for up to 6 months' time as a ta under a hero course teacher. Since we have nearly 7 months until the next entrance exam, if you were to accept, you would have your actual license by the time school starts for the next year's classes. Is that all? Dobby asked. Goodness no, those are simply the important details in regards to the VRC. Getting you, at the very least, a general education degree is just as important. While not needed to do this, it would at least provide greater legitimacy in the eyes of the Commission, even if they really can't stop us from going through with it anyway. They can't. Nezu shook his head, not without due reasoning. And since the law is designed for getting vigilantes proper hero license, calling you out as a vigilante would hardly do them any favors. There's got to be something they would be able to do if they wanted. Yes, there are several ways they could stop us, but that is why we would be looking at the finer details. Beyond that, they would need a reason to even bother. Dobby took several moments to digest everything that they have gone over. He took a deep breath before letting it out. Nezu, before we get to all that I have to ask. Nezu raised an eyebrow before coming to a realization. You want to know how the investigation is going? At Dobby's nod, the tiny teacher gave a sigh before saying, it's going about as well as one could expect. Given the Mont's position and resources and the fact that I have to do this quietly, Dobby, I will not lie to you. While I have found enough to warrant investigating further, it may take me up to 1.5 years, maybe 2 years, to gather enough solid evidence to ensure he won't get away with his crimes simply because he has excellent lawyers. He can't say he was not expecting the displeased look that found its way onto Dobby's face, however, it is better than the death glare or look of betrayal he had been expecting. Dobby, for his part, simply gave a deep, albeit annoyed, sigh before nodding in begrudging acceptance. I suppose that makes sense. I've been trying to find a way for 7 years now. Can't expect you to pull a miracle out of your ass. Nezu was thankful for the Todoroki's calm decision. Now that you mention it. Dobby, while we are on this topic, I need to ask, do you still go by Todoroki or have you changed your surname as well? Dobby looked surprised for a second before saying, yeah, I did change it. Probably should have told you that. I've been saying my mother's maiden name, Yutsukushiyuki. The man looked a tad sheepish as he rubbed his neck, though Nezu could not tell if it was because he forgot to tell him that or because the name meant beautiful, lovely snow. Well, probably the former, given how much admiration the man has for his mother, as evidenced by earlier conversations the two had. A lovely name. I'll make certain to use the proper name from this point on. Now I believe we have things to discuss. He gestures to the packet still in Dobby's hands. Right. Let's get to it. Line break to the Midoriya house. Izuku dried his hair as he walked out of the bathroom. After he got home, the first thing he did was take a shower to remove all the ash and sand. And well, he used a good amount of mouthwash as well. His mouth had still tasted like ash. He tossed his towel into his hamper as he entered his room. When in his room, he took note of the state of his room. He began organizing his notebooks and making sure his hero memorabilia was in its proper place. While his room used to be filled with nothing but All Might stuff, it now also contained several figurines of Maruko, who he had come to appreciate for her skill and ferocity. For a short period of time after his meeting with the number 1 hero, he had wondered if he should get rid of his All Might stuff before ultimately deciding against it. He was still very much a fan of the guy. No matter how much what he said had hurt, it had been no different than what anyone else said to him. Well, it was a little different. All Might was gentle in his delivery and had even stated other jobs he could do to still help people. In the guy's own words that day, people put so much stock into pros that they forget that there are all kinds of ways to be a hero, young man. A cop or a doctor helps and arguably saves just as many as I do as a pro hero. My advice to you is to maybe try something like that. So in the end, he really can't hate All Might. The guy is still his inspiration for even wanting to be a hero. The very reason he wants to save people with a smile. Besides, it's not like the guy left him alone on a rooftop, alone, after breaking his heart and dreams while he was having a panic attack. Weirdly specific example aside, he couldn't part with the merchandise he had. It was, to him, the representation of his desire to help others. He just added more, from both All Might and several other heroes. He even got an ever so rare Eraserhead figurine. They almost never came out with stuff on Underground Heroes. After making sure everything was set, Izuku once again started searching the internet for evidence of plasmids. However, he had searched for every word in the tapes as a whole that could allude to the DNA-altering serums. Searching for Adam or Eve just brings him to religious sites, searching for plasmids or tonics ended with a dead end, and searching, a way to get multiple quirks, just brings up urban legends about a centuries-old villain. Maybe if he searched for people with multiple quirks, he could find someone with familiar abilities and work backwards from there. There were tons of results, however the two that were the most notable were Shoto Todoroki, the next great hero, which he noted that endeavor had been a large part of the interview, and Maria Lamb, the woman with more quirks than anyone else. Taking special note of the second one, Izuku loaded that page. It turns out the woman had been a vigilante hero from the first generation of quirk users, back before being a pro hero was even an actual job. Having gone by the moniker of Guardian Diver, the woman had lived in several coastal American cities and had saved thousands of lives in each of them. She also did ocean rescue before any other hero in history. Several other claims to fame include leading several conservation efforts and performing many civil services, including cleaning beaches when she wasn't saving people. Bringing up an image of her, he could see why she called herself by that name, though he did find himself wondering the purpose of the large needle. The helmet bore a good deal of resemblance to old-time diving helmets, and the rest was similar to the old-time suits, albeit tighter with armor over vital parts. The article went on to explain that Maria claimed her grandmother, Eleanor Lamb, had all of the same quirks she did, though Eleanor had been dead for a decade by the point. Alluding to quirks being around far longer than previously believed, though that had been unconfirmed. The hero apparently had a considerable number of powers, all of which she had named individually, and bringing up a list of them, Izuku's eyes widened in surprise, as there plain as day was the names of every plasmid he had. Incinerate, Teleport, Sonic Boom and more. Well, he knew who he was looking up in as much detail as he could. Well, I hope everyone liked the story, and please share or leave a like or subscribe to see that you guys like the story, and I'll see you all on the next one.